All right. I will call the City Council and Town Center Development Agency meeting to order. City Recorder Krager, please take roll.
Councilor Lube.
Yes.
All right. Councilor Anderson.
Here.
Mayor Snyder.
Here.
Councilor Calderon.
Here.
Council President Goodhouse.
Here.
Councilor Newton.
Here.
All right, please all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll ask you to mute yourselves, and we'll put a flag up on the screen. Thank you. Okay, thank you all. We'll move on to council or staff, any non-agenda items for tonight.
Mr. Mayor, staff have no non-agenda items.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to public comment. Public comments were to be submitted in writing by 4:30 p.m. today. City Recorder Krager, can you confirm there were none received?
Yes, we did not receive any today.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item number 3 on the agenda, which is to receive a capital improvement plan update. City Engineer Faya.
Hello, Mayor and City Councilor. Can you all see and hear me? Yes? Oh, good. Waves. Thank you very much. So this will be my first capital improvement project update since COVID. The last one, I think, was the very last in-person council meeting. So I'd rather do this in person, but obviously cannot. I'm going to attempt to share my screen now. Again, I'm Lori Faya. I'm the city engineer. Sorry about that. And to go. Okay, can everybody see the slideshow? Woo, doing good. Okay, excellent. So, as council knows, I do this update approximately quarterly. So this will be an update on our capital improvement projects. That will be a year-end summary for fiscal year 20. So basically from for the year through June 30th, 2020. And our capital improvement program is part of the annual budget that council adopts. It's a 6-year plan, and it represents all of our basically design and construction projects, and also some planning projects that lead to construction of capital improvements that have a value of typically $50,000 or more. So, oops. I have to show the pretty picture first. The types of projects we'll be talking about are parks, streets, water, sewer, storm, and facilities. Those are all included in our capital improvement program, or CIP. I believe council should have received last week our project management updates, which give a more detailed information about each of the projects. So I'm hoping you got those. So let me just dive right in. I know you have a full agenda tonight, so and I have such a good time talking about all our projects, but I'll try to keep it to my half hour. So one thing I want to note as I'm talking about these projects, I'll just pick a few on each sheet to talk about. I can certainly answer questions on any of them. Basically, budget and schedule, I have kind of a green, yellow, red light format. I want to note that we've had recently, and perhaps for obvious reasons, we've had a very good bidding climate. So we've been receiving, when we've put projects out for bid for construction, and also when we've put projects out for competitive proposals from consultants, we've been seeing a lot of interest in our projects, and we've been getting, on the construction side, some good prices. So I'll mention a couple of places where we've been doing quite well. Helps obviously with our budget of public funding. On the park side, let's see, I'll point out on the Fano Creek Trail, the RFFA grant project, that's the 4 segments of Fano Creek Trail that are in design. They're at 90% design. I think council will recall a few months ago we had to ask for a pretty substantial increase to the budget, and you approved that in the adopted capital improvement plan. We've done our best to try to make scope changes and keep costs down, but it's been a long time with the ODOT process on this project, and we also had to make a wider trail than we originally thought we would. But we're working through all of that. The project is getting close. We're hoping to have it go out for bid in winter. And I do want to note something that's very helpful on this project is related to right-of-way. Clean Water Services, our partner agency, is going to donate an easement, a rather substantial easement across part of the Durham wastewater treatment plant property for part of this project. So that's a good-sized cost savings. So we're working on that with them, and much appreciated.
Lori, can I ask you a question about the Fano Creek Trail RFFA grants and the project there? I know that was one that we've been concerned about the cost implications of, right, or certain parts of it.
Yep.
Given the bidding climate that you were referencing earlier, are we going to be able to get more or most of that project done now and not have to cut scope like we had originally discussed?
So we cut some scope in a value engineering approach, but this last winter when we had the discussion about the budget issues, council was supportive of finding a way to fund the complete project. So that's why in the budget there was a substantial increase. Yes, hopefully we'll maintain a good bidding climate, and hopefully in the winter when it goes out, we'll see good prices, and that will help, and maybe we won't have to expend as much of our parks SDC money as we had budgeted for it. So, cross your fingers on that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. So more parks projects. I'll point out, on the end of tonight's agenda, you'll have an update on the Parks Master Plan. So I won't say any more about that. I'll save the excitement for the end of the evening. It's going to be good stuff. I'll note under Parks Major Maintenance, we've got quite a few things done last year. One of the things I was excited about, and we received definitely some kudos about, was getting the Pozzo Dog Park parking lot paved. So yay for that. Universal Plaza, I imagine folks have noticed that the building was demolished, and there's some painting of the parking area that has occurred. So that's moving along. The Fano Creek Trail alignment study, so that is for that very last segment of Fano Creek Trail, not the ones we just talked about, but the last segment, which is from basically Bonita to Durham. And very difficult section to do the planning for. There is a reason it's the last segment of trail. And we have a preferred staff alignment figured out. It was very difficult. There was certain areas, particularly around Durham Road itself, about figuring out how you get people across Durham Road or under Durham Road. And then you have the school and the wastewater treatment plant there kind of in the way. So the staff proposed alignment for that, and more information will be coming on this, but I can give a little preview, is that the recommended trail alignment would come down along Fano Creek between Bonita and Durham Road, and then follow Durham Road, probably with a future multi-use path, which would be like a wider bike ped separated grade path along Durham over to the extension of Hall Boulevard, which is 85th. We're going to be putting this out for considerable stakeholder and public review. It's a lot more difficult now with COVID, and we're working on different ways to get input, including from communities who may not have easy access to like our virtual website. So we're working on some ideas about how to get to various folks who, particularly who live adjacent to the trail. But that's coming along.
Quick, Council President Goodhouse here. Quick observation. I like how on the Universal Plaza that there's the signage that's been put up on the fences. The fences are covered in it's saying the Universal Plaza and has a website so people can go and know what's going on there and see about it. So I think that was great that got put up. I think it was just 2 or 3 days ago, or maybe over the weekend, that the fence is all covered in signs. It's great.
It's very colorful.
Oh yes.
So let's move on to streets projects. I'll mention, I'm sure everybody's noticed the pavement management program annually. The annual program was occurring. A lot of that this year, the slurry seal was focused on Summerfield. I'll show you some pictures at the end of this in regards to that. Some items coming soon in the pavement management program is that because the basic summer work is complete. So that was Durham Road had an overlay. There was slurry seal, as I mentioned, in that whole Summerfield area, and there was curb ramps done along 121st. In addition, we're trying a new thing this year, and you're going to see a contract to hopefully award. I'm thinking it might even be in the next week or so, and that is for getting ahead of ourselves for the crack seal. So crack seal you do before slurry seal, so that's where you see the little black seal going along all the cracks in the pavement, and it helps the slurry seal last longer. So you're going to see a contract to see work in September that's going to cover quite a bit of the city, and that's in advance of next summer's program. So I think it's great to get ahead of that. It's actually works better for contracting and finding the right specific contractors as well. And we got such a good bid price from the selected contractor that we were able to do some add-on packages and get even more crack seal done. In addition, you'll be seeing over the fall some discussion about developing the next 5-year plan for the pavement management program. And also, you may recall there was a discussion about needing to update the street maintenance fee. So those items will be coming to you with more information in the fall.
I have a quick question again.
Yep.
I saw through the city Facebook page, I think that 109th didn't get slurry sealed or paved or wherever.
Right.
How does that work, or how does that affects the schedule? Or did that resources go somewhere else to a different project this cycle, or is it just going to be carried over to next year?
Yeah, it'll get carried over to next year. So that was at the very end of the slurry seal process. So we didn't have the ability to wait longer. We had a real problem on that street with getting everybody to move their cars. So we'll work a little bit harder on that next year. But it will get slurry sealed. The timing just didn't work out on it for this year. Plus there's construction of a new development going on adjacent, which made it very difficult to deal with coordination between that construction equipment and our slurry seal construction equipment. So it just made sense to hold off and put it in next year's program.
Thank you.
Let's see. I think one of the good things to talk about in the pedestrian and cyclist connections program is there was a lot of interest in the Fano Creek Trail at Shoals project. So that's where we've had a lot of trail flooding occurring, and a lot of interest in trying to solve that problem. And we had a website up, our Engage website up. This work was done jointly between 5 jurisdictions, but Tigard leading it, to manage a study to figure out what is the solution to that. So we put up a recommendation for comment. We had, I believe you got a summary about this in one of your packets, but we had a whole lot of interest, hundreds of people on the website making comments. We had about a 70% approval rate for the idea of doing an at-grade crossing with a signalized pedestrian crossing of Shoals Ferry Road. So now we'll be in a position to go after grant funding for that project, and that's already teed up for Metro and their Parks Bond. So I'm hopeful that we will get some money from that and be able to build it jointly as the partner agencies. In addition, I'll note Clean Water Services has gone ahead, and of course they do the beaver management activity, which sometimes keeping ahead of the beavers is really difficult. But they're working on a project to try to add a little bit of pavement depth to the trail underneath Shoals Ferry Road. It's very tight, the amount of elevation available, but they can add a little bit. So they're working on permitting right now to be able to do that, so it wouldn't be flooded quite as often. Plus, we'll be pursuing the at-grade option, so that kind of at least keeps the two options available for that trail. So I'm pretty excited with where that's going. And let me also mention 121st Avenue. So that's our project that county MSTIP funds are funding the construction of bike lanes and sidewalks along 121st. In September, you'll see an item coming before you that's a resolution of necessity related to, that's the process to be able to go out and get easements and right-of-way from multiple property owners along there, because obviously that's widening that roadway. But that is proceeding. Let's see, let me move on to more streets projects. Wall Tech Center Drive. So that contractor's been selected and they're ready to get started on construction. So very soon here you'll see that last bit of connection to Wall Street being constructed, as well as a signal at 72nd and Tech Center Drive. Let's see, Main Street Phase 2. We've had a little bit of delay because of trying to figure out how to do communications best during COVID. It's very complicated, and also trying not to overwhelm small business owners and what is the right timing for getting a hold of them. We had our project manager had a very fruitful meeting with the TDA just I think maybe last week, and working with them on ideas about how to best engage with the businesses on Main Street, and also coming up with an approach to try to promote those businesses now and not just waiting for during the midst of construction. So I think there's some really great conversations going on, and working on getting a hold of those property owners and talking through with each of them what the potential plans are for that street. Let's see, water projects. Let's see, in September, so for Cache Reservoir and Pump Station, that is a huge project. It's necessary to provide particularly fire water service to the Growing River Terrace area. And it includes a pump station and a pipeline. It's close to a $25 million project. So that is something we need additional help with for managing that size of a project. So what you'll see coming to you in September is a contract with an owner's rep, an owner's representative design firm. So, or I shouldn't call it, they're a design firm, but they'll be our owner's representative. Basically, it's giving staffing support to us to help manage such a large project all the way from design through construction. The other thing the owner's rep will help us with is, because of the size of this project, we think it's going to make most sense to do more of a design build type approach to this project, something that's called progressive design build. That will be brought forward to council because you would have to approve that approach rather than a standard design, bid, and build project. But I think we'll get a lot of benefit about having the construction contractor and the design firm working together through the project. I think it has a much greater opportunity for success. So you'll be seeing that the first step, getting the owner's rep, will be coming before you in September. Let's see, and I'll just mention also about the Water Master Plan. You'll be seeing a couple of updates coming to you about the Water Master Plan. It's the draft needs for the water system, and also cost implications and information about a rate study that's also ongoing, coming to you in the next couple of months. So more to come on that. Oh, and I'll mention the Greenfield emergency repair. You'll remember that, where we had the water line break and we had to close Greenfield for months. That is complete. Went really well, came in well under budget. So at least not great to have a water line break, but at least we were successful in getting it completed.
Lori, I'm just excited to see all these projects with so much green in the budget category. I can't remember a CIP report out that has so much green in budget, so that's exciting.
Yay, yes. Thank you. So yeah, there's a lot of good work going on. Let's see, I'll mention under sanitary sewer projects that I've mentioned before that I'm very fond of our major maintenance programs, because this is the opportunity to get kind of those medium-sized problems solved that aren't big enough to compete as individual capital projects, but they're not just like your standard everyday maintenance. We have committees that work on prioritizing kind of the medium-sized problems that often our operations staff are the ones who identify these needs. So for instance, with the sanitary sewer major maintenance program, we're going to have construction starting soon in Jack Park. And in the northern part of Jack Park, where there's a trail that goes across the creek, and there's been a lot of silt buildup. This is that story of Kruger Creek and how it has eroded so much. Well, Jack Park is one of the places where that silt has settled out. And one of the problems we have is that a manhole for sanitary sewer that's right next to the creek is being covered up by that silt. So we have a major maintenance project to raise that manhole. So things like that are what we do with that funding. In a little bit, I'll show you a picture about East Fort Dairydale Creek. That's an exciting project to do some stream rehabilitation repairs, because it had been eroding and there was exposed sanitary sewer lines, danger of breaking. And I'll show you some cool pictures from some of the critters in that creek. That we had to clear out so that then the work could occur to restore the stream banks and build these like beaver dam analogs. The other thing that you're going to start seeing construction on immediately here is the Fano Creek sanitary siphon repair. So that's where we have another exposed sanitary sewer line. It's right where it crosses Fano Creek, just north or upstream of Bonita Road. And that construction is, I think, underway or just getting started. I think that's good for sanitary sewer. There is a red dot there, so I probably should note that. The sanitary sewer master plan update, I think I've mentioned this before, but we're waiting to implement the new the Tyler asset management program before we conduct our sanitary sewer master plan, because we think we're going to have a lot more access to important reports and data analysis on our system condition than we can get access to now with our current system. So it just makes sense to wait another year on that. So stormwater projects, let's see, we'll note one thing I'll note is the Tigard Triangle Stormwater Plan. So this was a recommendation of our Stormwater Master Plan for the city that we do further analysis for Red Rock Creek in the Tigard Triangle. That's one of our highly degraded creeks where we've had multiple sewer line breaks in the past. And so this is getting more of a handle on exactly what needs to be done. We're doing this work jointly with Clean Water Services. And it's really exciting because it's looking like we're getting to a point, we're nearly complete, where we've determined that if we do restoration of that Red Rock Creek in that area, we can make that stream channel more resilient and it can handle the stormwater coming to it. And in that manner, we can have new development help fund those improvements to the creek, because they can do that instead of building big stormwater detention ponds on their building sites. So kind of a win-win for everybody. So that's where we're hoping to get to with this plan in the next few months. We have to still have some discussions with federal agencies like the National Marine Fisheries Service, but we're feeling pretty good about it. It also would be helpful to the light rail project, assuming that occurs. So instead of having a whole bunch of big ponds along the light rail alignment on potentially developable property, the light rail project could potentially pay towards this stream restoration work instead. So hopefully win-win on all of that. I'm very excited about it. And let's see. Oh, I'll note, so we've now closed out the American Disabilities Act transition plan. You adopted that last December, but what was great was we had some money left over in the construction budget, so we used it to do staff training and some really great staff training that we were able to pull off virtually and then record it so staff can continue to utilize those training tools in the future. So very excited about that. And then just a brief look forward is these are just a snapshot of some of the things happening in the current fiscal year, FY21. So let's see, we talked about the Fano Creek Trail cost, the Cook Park infield project. We're working on that. There's a little bit of complexity because those baseball fields are in the Tualatin River floodway, not just floodplain, which is a more difficult scenario, and they're in the what's called the vegetated corridor or buffer area. So it just makes it more complex to permit changing those to turf fields, but we will get there. Oh, one thing I'll note that's very exciting for the streets projects, you'll note the fourth bullet there is it says approximately 1/3 of our streets capital improvement funds for the next year are going towards bike and ped improvements. So if you look at it dollar-wise, either as individual projects or pieces of larger projects, about 1/3 of our funds are funding bike ped projects. So I think that really focuses on our city's vision. I've mentioned some of these other things. I do want to mention about the stormwater projects is that the Kruger Creek project. So that's you'll remember seeing Carla in the canyon, right? The video, and we showed our staff person standing in the amazingly scary canyon. Scary. So we're starting the design this year for that project. That'll be a multi-year project, a substantial project to fix that creek. We'll move from there then on to Red Rock Creek. And so I wanted to note that those are, predicated on that council approved that rate increase last year. I know we've delayed it because of COVID, but presuming we're able to implement that stormwater fee increase, that's what's going to pay for these projects that we identified the needs for in the master plan. And I think that's good for the look ahead, unless there's any questions, and then I can show you a few pictures.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Newton, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Councilor Newton.
Yeah, thanks, Lori. Great presentation. You noted that a lot of these projects obviously are going to be dependent on the rate increases that we've delayed. I know we're going to be having, I think it's going to be October 3rd, a budget committee meeting to talk about the budget in light of some of the things going on with COVID and some of the things happening that may be impacting our budgets. I'm wondering if it wouldn't be prudent, and I mentioned this to the mayor and the city manager, to present information should we decide to delay the rate increases again and not go forward in January. It would be good to know if we could get a general sense of what the impacts would be on projects. I think it would be helpful for the budget committee to know if we felt like we, due to the economic situation when we get to the first of the year, if we wanted to consider that. So would that be something you could put together in general terms? Or maybe that's a question for Toby, but I know that, it definitely has an impact on the projects we're able to do, but it's also something, unfortunately, we might have to talk about. So
Yeah, I think with finance's help, we could definitely talk about that. I know we already did a bit of that in this a few months ago for the
right.
currently adopted budget. We did some really quick work to assess how much gas tax we thought we really were going to get in, because it's being reduced. And what we did to kind of cover things in the short term was we were able to figure out some additional projects that we could fund from transportation system development charges instead of gas tax. But that's
Sure.
only a temporary solution because there's only so much money in those funds. So
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. It would just be good information to have, I think. Thank you.
mhm.
All right. Other councilors have questions or comments for the city engineer?
I would just echo what Councilor Newton said. I think it'd be good for us to know ahead of that budget discussion if we are looking at a delay in a rate increase, if there's anything that we may need to consider that still needs to stay in there, and maybe look at some alternatives, especially with those Tigard Grand Canyons, as we call them. There might be things we can't hold off on, or maybe we have to juggle some things around. So I echo what Councilor Newton was saying, that it would be good to have some more information or some alternatives of what we could do.
And Lori, as always, it's wonderful to see all of the major work that is being done on behalf of all the residents of Tigard. I want to thank you and the team members that are in, probably almost every department in the city that help make these really significant improvements and projects happen for everyone. So thank you. And unless there are any other final questions or comments, I will move us on to the next item on the agenda.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Do you guys see the pictures? I have a couple left, or do you want me to cut it out?
Oh, absolutely.
Mayor?
I'm sorry,
Mr.
we
Mayor?
cut you off. Yes, Councilor Newton.
Sorry, I just wanted to echo your comments. And one thing I also want to compliment you on, Lori, is I think this is a great way to show the community what we're working on, what we're accomplishing. And I think it's great to be forthcoming where we're really hitting the nail on the head on budget and schedule, and to help people understand the challenges we have and why. So it's great information presented in a way that is easy for the community to also understand. So thanks for your work.
Thank you. That's very nice.
And yes on the pictures, please.
Oh,
Mayor
good.
Snyder, I'd just like to sort of echo, what Councilor Newton was saying, but also, some of our projects, like the pavement management program, it's much more obvious when you're driving on this beautifully smooth road, and it's all very exciting. But, a lot of these other projects are just as important, but they go unseen. And so I always really enjoy your presentations and the pictures that come that really tell the story of what the city does. We're not just paving the streets, we're taking care of, the stormwater and the water and the parks and all of these different projects that are going on. And I think it's really important, especially to talk about it now during this time when our city doors are closed, but it's obvious that we're still working, we're still doing city business. And so thank you for all of the projects and everything that you have listed here.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So I'm showing a really pretty picture right now. Hopefully everybody's seen it. It's the artwork that's gone along on the new Tigard Street Heritage Trail and Plaza. I just think this is gorgeous. Let's see. Also nearby, this is just a cool example of us cobbling together funds to do a really good thing. Is that to connect the new Tigard Street Heritage Trail over, so if you go along Grant Street, then you get to the Fano Creek Trail, and there was a sidewalk gap and also kind of a safety gap across Tigard Street. So we pulled together some money from the Bike and Pedestrian Program and also from the Pavement Management Program, because Grant Avenue at Tigard Street was in horrible condition. It was in our backlog street list that we hadn't gotten to yet. And so to as part of doing this bike ped project to create a more safe connection between those two trails, we said, hey, we could throw a little bit of pavement management money at it and do some fixing of the whole street. So this is a picture of it under construction, and then here's what it looks like now. This is looking the other way at Tigard Street, but you can see we've got now a great looking intersection. We've got the we didn't have money to fully put a sidewalk in, but we were able to create a little bit of extra pavement and put in those delineators so people have a safer place to walk and ride their bike between the trails. And if you look real closely, above the stop sign, if you can see my arrow, there's a little solar panel, and then also across the street. So that's a new RRFB, rectangular rapid flashing beacon, so that people can push the button and have a safer crossing of the road. So very excited about cobbling together funds to do that little project. Here's just a fun picture of when Durham Road is what we paved this year. So this machine is grinding up the existing pavement in the driving lane, and then we pave behind that. And then this is just really cool. This is just a kudos to our project manager for the pavement management program, Nicole George, is that we were in Summerfield this year. A lot of people watching us with the paving in Summerfield, and or this was slurry seal, but so she did lots of great little extra things, really great, talking with everybody, but also this is an example of where she had the crew keep a pathway open when the slurry seal was put down so that the golf carts could go across the street. So I thought that was pretty cool. Oh, and this is super fun. So Eastport Dairydale Creek, where I said we were doing that stream restoration project. So one of the requirements is you have to electroshock in the creek, and you have to grab the little fish and save them, pull them out of the section where you're doing the construction. So in the cooler on the left, those are sculpin fish. Those are native fish that were pulled out of the creek. And then let's see if I can make this happen. So if you look in the bucket on the right, you can see there's this little line right here. It is a lamprey. So maybe you can see it wiggling up there in the bucket, the little lamprey eel. So that's also a native that was pulled out of the creek. So our urban creeks have native fish and other cool critters in them, and that's really exciting to me, and people don't always know that. So there it's wiggling again. All right, so that was the end of that presentation. So unless there's other questions, I'll stop sharing the screen.
Thank you, Lori. We appreciate it. And we will move on to item number 4, which is to receive an update on Ascension Drive traffic issues. City Engineer Faya again.
All right, here I am again. So I'm going to try sharing my screen again. But I want to bring up the other PowerPoint. So I'm sorry, just a second. There we go. Okay, can everybody see that? Okay, thank you very much. So, Council asked for an update on Ascension Drive. It's been since February, many months of lots of input and discussion about traffic safety issues and parking on Ascension Drive. So it's been a bit of a difficult process, and we've learned a lot along the way. And I'm hoping to share that with you and then answer any questions. So here's kind of a bit of a quick agenda of the things I want to go through in this presentation. So a little bit of background and history. We initially proposed some things. We heard a lot of feedback. We adjusted the proposal. I want to talk about what's included and what's not and why. Also want to talk with you about what we learned along the way. And part of it was we need to find better ways to be more transparent about how we manage traffic complaints. Part of it also is we're learning along the way right now with how to do communications during COVID. And I think that just made this so much more difficult to have these communications, where in the past on other somewhat similar situations, we would have had a neighborhood meeting and would have had a lot more back and forth talk all together. And COVID and figuring out how to have these communications has made things so much more difficult. So, we've stumbled around a bit. We're learning a lot. So anyways, and then talk about next steps and answer questions. So just, I'm assuming everybody knows, but I'll do a little map here of showing where Ascension Drive is. It's on Bull Mountain. It's this kind of windy road. It's very steep. It's very narrow. It's a 28-foot wide street. It was built in 1995. And frankly, it should have been marked with no parking on at least one side at that point in time. We don't know why. That does predate our current standards, but I would be surprised to think they would have been different then. We don't know why it wasn't marked as no parking at the time. Not sure. We tried to find records and couldn't find them. So anyways, bit of a mystery there. A little bit of other background. In 2017, there was considerable input. It was particularly focused around, there was a reckless driving incident where somebody kind of hit and run type scenario drove across a neighbor's yard in the S-curves, right across their lawn. And so at that time, there was a number of staff meetings with individuals in the neighborhood. And after listening to folks' issues about what I'll call kind of speeding and reckless driving, obviously, at that time, the city response was posting, there's now 15-mile-per-hour advisory speed signs at the curves. Those are advisory. Those are not enforceable. The speed limit now is the standard speed limit for a residential roadway, which is 25 miles per hour. But we posted those so people, hopefully at least some people, would think about it. At that time, we said, let's purchase some Your Speed Is feedback signs, and we'll start rotating them around the city, and we'll put them first up on Ascension Drive. So we did that. We also started collecting annual traffic speed and traffic count data. We do that citywide, but that was when we started collecting that data for Ascension. Police have conducted targeted enforcement several times up there. Interesting thing about that is, so I've determined from all of this that every one of us probably has a different definition of what speeding means. If you ask a traffic or transportation engineer, quite often they'll say that speeding is when like 85% of the people are driving at or less than at least 5 miles an hour over the posted speed limit, so like 30 miles an hour. The police might tell you they're only going to pull people over if they're going 10 miles an hour over the speed limit. And I think we kind of all know that, right? Like, oh, I know I can drive on the highway at 65 when it's posted 55 type thing. But a person living along the street might say, well, speeding is maybe people are actually going 25 or 30, but boy, it feels really fast when they're zooming past my house or coming up, going through the curves. So I've learned, this is another place to learn where sometimes we all use the same term and we have a different definition for it. At that time, also in 2017, there was a request for speed humps. Staff denied it then. I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. More recently, in February, city staff received a complaint about low visibility through the S-curves. So again, as I noticed, it's narrow, it's steep. There's parking allowed on both sides. A 28-foot wide street with parking on both sides is quite narrow. And as you're going around the curves, So we had this complaint that said, we don't think we would be able to see an object in the street, or like a little kid in the street, or there might be a head-on collision because we can't see going around those curves. We took that seriously and conducted our own investigation, confirmed that there was substandard sight distance, particularly with parked cars, and so suggested a solution of removing parking. So this is one place where I will say we probably could have written this letter better. But we sent a letter to the neighbors in the curves and said, we're going to remove parking in the curves. And unhappiness resulted from that. And so we said, well, okay, maybe they don't really understand why we're feeling the need to do this, that our engineering analysis is suggesting that there is not sight distance to be able to stop in time. And so we sent an additional letter to more neighbors that said, here's why. Much more unhappiness. So we said, okay, we're gonna back off a bit here. And then we were in the midst of COVID. So like I said, it would have been great probably to have been able to have a neighborhood meeting. I think that would have been helpful to have been more face-to-face. What we came up with at the time was trying to figure out doing something that doesn't take all of my staff's time, but being responsive, is we set up one-on-one Microsoft Teams meetings individually with each property owner in the curves, and just set those up as listening sessions so we could hear about their concerns about what we had proposed with removing the parking. In addition to that, we created a Tigard Engage webpage, set that up starting July 1, and sent out to all the neighbors that we had email addresses for, saying, please go to this. We've posted a bunch of information, and we're asking for any additional input, concerns, ideas. And that was live through the month of July. And approximately weekly, as questions came in, we created responses to those questions, posted them along with the questions back onto the website. And then a little bit more detail about the engagement page. I do like the ability to use this engagement website that we have, because it's a lot more interactive. Let's see. So one of the things we posted on there was, at that point in time when we created the engagement website, we had already had the individual conversations with the people that lived in the curves. And after listening to them, it's like, yeah, it's a pretty big deal to lose parking that you've had for 25 years in front of your house. So was there any way that we could at least, leave some of it? So I decided to kind of override the initial engineering recommendation a bit. This is taking risk on for the city. A lot of this is about risk. And there is a sight distance problem, but the idea was, could we leave some of the parking so that they could still have that quality of life aspect in their neighborhood, and try to get people to drive a little bit less recklessly with some other measures. And so we posted on the website the amended recommendation, which was to have no parking on one side, which really means part on one side and part on the other side. And I'll show you a picture of that. Add striping to the middle of the street in the curves to give a visual cue to stay in your lane, and to also pursue what is now available to us, because legislature in 2019 passed the ability for cities to be able to implement a 20-mile-per-hour neighborhood streets program that hasn't been available to us until just recently. So we want to pursue that for council approval for certain neighborhood streets, including Ascension Drive. This was all posted on the website. And here's what we heard after a month of having that open. Basically, we heard kind of three key messages. People would like to see speed humps like they see on some of the adjacent streets. issues with speeding that also seemed to be coupled with issues about increasing traffic volume, and about 40% being unsupportive of removing parking in the curves. I don't know if that percent would have been larger if we hadn't posted that we were going to try to just do it on one side. And I just want to point out that we heard clearly from the neighbors in the curves that removing all of the parking would definitely cause access and livability issues. So these are the kind of the summary of what we've heard. So based on all that, and considering risk for the city and risk for a lot of people with little kids in that neighborhood, here's what I put out as the final proposal for this issue. One is removing parking on one side. So that would be the inside of the curves on each side. So we'll go from one side to the other. I'm adding, particularly because I think it was well illustrated by an accident that occurred, somewhat of a head-on collision that occurred in the curves during this whole thing. That was a great demonstration of the reckless driving where people particularly come zooming up that hill and screeching through the curves and in the middle of the curves. That occurred without any parking being present at the time along the curves. I think it could have been even a more head-on collision if there'd been parking at that point in time. So we still need to improve some vision in there. So remove parking on one side, but I want to add a permanent installation of a your speed is sign. So we'll purchase one that's a solar sign that can be put as you're heading into the curves, and leave that there on Ascension. Install a centerline stripe in the curves with raised buttons. So again, pointing out that you need to stay on your side as you're zooming up through there. We will certainly continue to collect speed and volume data, and continue to consider if anything might be appropriate in the future, and definitely pursue the 20-mile-per-hour speed limit for priority neighborhood streets, including Ascension. And actually, we're working on that proposal right now. I will mention something about the 20-mile-per-hour program. Is if council adopts that, it's not something that's immediately in effect on every street, because the way the legislature wrote the rules, it only goes into effect once you put up signs that say 20 mile per hour on any given street. So it's a program that will have to get rolled out over time, picking the highest priority streets first, because until you get those signs installed, it's not enforceable. So unlike the street now where you don't have to have a 25-mile-per-hour sign on because that is just the given speed limit, you have to have the posted 20 up. Here's the measures that are not included. Leaving the parking alone, we still need sight distance, and that still requires some removal of parking. Speed humps. So people mention these a lot. I will say personally, speed humps are actually very controversial. Some people love them, some people hate them. They're quite loud. Not the hump itself, but people driving over them. The issue we have here, and my engineering staff is pretty concerned about this, Ascension is very steep. It's even steeper than some of the adjacent streets where you have speed humps. And so there would have to be a very careful analysis to look at, is there any appropriate location that leaves the ability for people to come to that speed hump at appropriate speed and not just fly over it. So I'm not recommending speed humps at this time. Also, we do not have an existing program for speed humps. I've been at the city 5.5 years. We have not had a program then. There was not one for many years before that. There are speed humps in Tigard. They are older. They've been in, so it's pre-existing. Here's what I'll say about them is that I think they can be useful in certain situations. I think it belongs in a toolkit of traffic calming measures. And so that's something that's being worked on right now, is the toolkit of traffic calming measures. And I think if we establish a program it's not inexpensive to do the correct surveying, engineering, work with neighbors, construct it properly, and maintain it. So you have to pick the right locations, and consider what's the highest priority, what's equity in terms of where you apply them. I think we need to figure that out. So I'll leave that at that for now, and I can answer questions. But and then another request that I heard a lot, or we heard a lot, was blocking the street to outside traffic. So I think this is really, to me, a citywide issue. Growth, right? There's a lot of growth. There's a lot of growth in Tigard. There's a lot of growth in the surrounding communities. And many streets, probably every street, is seeing increases in traffic volume. Ascension is certainly one of those, one of many. It's a neighborhood route to provide connectivity from one place to another. It's not a private street. It's not a dead-end street. It's a neighborhood route where neighbors and neighbors in adjacent neighborhoods have this public street available to them. We already lack a lot of connectivity in Tigard, and I'm not a big fan of reducing the connectivity that we do have. So here's just a picture to show you that idea of line of sight issues. So if you can see my arrow, this is an example of the type of analysis that gets done. This shows for, I think this one was for like 30 miles an hour, the distance you'd need to be able to see. So if you're in a car right here on the yellow point, you'd need to be able to see across this distance to have enough stopping distance. So if there's something in the street. So I think, as you can see from these lines, not only would parking in the street be an issue, I mean, potentially even that's not quite enough width. But, we're dealing with an existing neighborhood. I'm not suggesting that we, try to widen the street. But this is just the type of analysis where you can see where you need to have that visual information so you have enough time to hit the brakes. Let me talk just briefly about what we've learned. So this has brought to light a number of concerns, and it's something we can really learn from. So one is, it made it clear to me, and actually I shouldn't say this makes me happy, but it makes me, I guess, happy in terms of I've wanted to have a more transparent complaint management program. And I know that everyone out there can't read what's in our minds. And so we do good work, we do good analysis, but you don't know that we're doing that. You don't know what we're thinking and doing. And so I want this to be an opportunity for us to put that in writing. So council will know, so citizens will know, here's what happens when a complaint gets sent into the city. We also want to direct complaints to our online website portal because it's easier for us to track information that way. But we get hundreds of complaints every year. We do look at them all. We can't address them all. And people need to know how those things are prioritized and looked at and what we can do and what we can't do. So this is
Sorry, when you say we get hundreds of complaints, you're talking about traffic complaints right now, right?
I am. Thank you for that clarification. Okay. Yes, we get hundreds of traffic complaints a year. So we need to be able to communicate that. And we also need to do a good job of listening to folks. So it actually was really helpful to listen to the neighbors because it clarified that this was like many situations, it was complex. There's a visibility situation, but there's also a reckless driving situation. And so we need to look at those together. We want to use data to help prioritize and direct where, limited funding can be used for traffic calming. And that's what this program we're working on putting together will help us with. And like I said, we want to improve transparency. So I'll show you a little bit of information. This is really compelling information. So our traffic engineer put this together. So this is a table, this is just draft, but this is a table that shows if you look at the streets where we've received speeding complaints, this is a list of the streets. a list of their posted speed limit, and then for all of these we have data on the speed that people drive on those streets, and it's called the measured 85th. That means 85% of the people measured were driving at that speed or less. So when you look at this information and you just order it in this case by how much over the posted speed limit that people are driving, Ascension is on the list, but it's not at the top of the list. So for instance, 79th, 85% of the people are driving 38 miles an hour in a 25. And that's a street where people with kids are walking to school. So we're working on some items for that one now, some proposals. But I think this prioritization process could be even tweaked a bit more. So for instance, you'll notice here there's some notes about some of these are routes to school. Ascension, it's steep and narrow with curves. I think we could add information about where there is or isn't sidewalks and those types of things. But this is useful for thinking about this program I'm talking about as developing and presenting about how we may want to prioritize projects. So if something comes in with a speeding complaint, one, checking is it a valid complaint, and then two, where does it fit on the list? Also, this is a look at even more data. So we have traffic volume and speed data citywide. This is an interesting map because basically the bigger the circle and the closer it is to orange or red, the worse the situation is the way you can read this. So here's 79th over here on the right. You can also see Sattler. You can see North Dakota. Those look like streets that we should be prioritizing for dealing specifically with speeding issues. Ascension is in the green and blue. So this was me trying out a new piece of software to try to do a flow chart, but I wanted to demonstrate that we do have an existing process for going through the complaints that we receive in regards to traffic. It's just, as I noted before, you can't read our mind and know exactly what we do, but all the complaints that come in, and we're now either encouraging people to put them on the website portal or we're typing the information in ourselves. We do scan all of that. Like I said, it's hundreds of them, but we scan them, do a quick review, and do a quick definition of one, is it a well-defined problem? If it is it something we might consider high risk? Like the reason why we prioritized looking at the complaint for Ascension was because it was about somebody saying, we think there's a big potential for a head-on collision. And we're like, that is something we should prioritize looking at and then confirm that that is an issue. So high risk, address it. So first, is it something we can, is it defined? Is it something we can potentially do something about as a city? Yes, sort and prioritize for response. If it's something where the problem's not well defined, again, is it the type of problem that's higher risk? Prioritize trying to figure that one out. Lower priority for figuring out the other types of problems, and then eventually dump those into the bucket. So this is current process. It also is what I anticipate will be basically ongoing process. So next steps, the website's closed. We need to do a report back to neighbors about what we've heard and staff final decision in regards to Ascension. I've noted what that is for implementation summer and fall. The no parking on one side through the back-to-back curves, on the inside of each curve, add striping and tactile bumps, installation of a permanent year speed sign is, continue to collect data, pursue the 20-mile-per-hour program with a goal of having that program in place December of 2020 so we can start putting in signs, and implement a more transparent traffic safety and parking issues program and process with information on the website. Goal for that also of December of 2020. This last item, we've already started talking to our transportation strategy team, which includes the mayor and Councilor Goodhouse. We've started talking to the Tigard Transportation Advisory Committee as well about this, as well as staff stakeholders from Public Works, Community Development, and Police about this as well. So more to come on that. So, questions?
Wow, Lori, that was very thorough, and thank you for that. I know the multiple council members had asked for a briefing on this, both related to Ascension as requested, but also for the bigger picture of how we handle these types of complaints. And I think this is good transparency for our community as well. Do any city councilors have any comments or questions?
I do, Mayor.
Go ahead, Councilor Anderson.
Lori, has the increase in traffic been exacerbated by GPS routing?
I don't know if we know that for sure, but it sure wouldn't surprise me that some of the routing programs, you know, sometimes they send you to weird places, right? But I also just think there's a lot of growth. I mean, if you look at the map and at, you know, folks getting from, say, up on Bull Mountain or River Terrace area and then down to like the stores along Barrows,
right?
This is one of those routes.
Yeah, very popular route. I was just wondering if there was a way to remove a through street from GPS maps, but that may be down the line.
Yeah, I don't know.
Any other questions or comments from council?
Council President Goodhouse.
Go ahead.
Quick comment on what Councilor Anderson said. I know there was an app called Waze that used to route people a lot through neighborhoods, and I think cities complained enough where they took some of those routes off. So, but I don't know if there's anything else that can be done to stop those apps from putting people through neighborhoods. Thank you for the presentation and all the information. I did have a couple questions on the on implementing the 20 miles per hour signs. What's the additional cost going to be to putting those in? Because I imagine that sometimes it would be the cost of the sign, but some areas might be tricky of where to put those in or how to install them and so forth. Is that going to be very much of an additional cost? And I have a couple other questions.
There's definitely a cost to those. I mean, they're not hugely expensive, but yes, there's a cost for each set of signs. What we'll plan to do is come up with kind of an implementation plan to roll it out, because, you know, we have one sign guy in Public Works. So we have to think about what is our capacity, not only to afford signs, but to create them and install them. So what we'll do is come up with a prioritized list and hit those top priority streets first, and then probably year to year, over maybe 2 or 3 years, implement the other streets.
Okay, great. And then I was wondering, in the conversation about speed humps, instead of speed humps, I've seen some cities where instead of the actual hump itself, you still have the pattern painted up on the ground where it deters the, or at least catches someone's attention to slow down, but then you don't have the installation of a hump or that noise of I know that's one of the big things where you get if you get a trailer go over it, you get the sounds and the echoing. Is that something that we've looked at to see if that's feasible or would actually work for traffic calming, to paint kind of more of the arrows with the pattern of what a speed hump looks like without actually putting a hump in?
I think that's something we can look at as part of developing that toolkit. Yeah, I've seen some really interesting looking ones. They tend to be the more kind of artistic ones. Some of them look like the bars are floating in air and some things like that. I've seen those more in downtown type areas. The maintenance on kind of odd painting can be pretty difficult, so I'm not entirely convinced that it's cheaper to put those in. But I also think this may be our opportunity to try some things. We may want to pick a few locations around the city and try some things.
Yeah, I was thinking if you just still painted the same pattern that was maybe on a speed hump with just kind of the diagonal arrows, at least maybe people might see it and still slow down. And then the last question on Ascension Drive, you're mentioning that putting your speed sign, is that going to be on both sides of the curves, or is that going to be on one side? And is it going to pick up the speed from both directions or only one direction?
So those are one directional. So you put it on the side where people are driving up. I think you see we have quite a few of those, like around school zones that it tells you your speed. I certainly want to place a permanent one for people going uphill, because that seems to be the primary problem, is actually people gunning it going uphill through those curves. It does not seem to be as much of an issue for people, interestingly, coming downhill. We can look into that. My proposal at this point is the permanent one for going uphill, but we could keep the other location in the rotation for the citywide signs. So that's the proposal.
Okay. And thank you for all the follow-up and the great work you did with working with everyone and communicating.
Okay.
Councilor Lube, I have a question.
Go ahead, Councilor Lube.
I was also interested in the map you showed earlier with all of the orange and the red for, So it looks like we have a couple of targeted areas. You mentioned 79th and Statler. Do we eventually have a plan to start to try to address these? I mean, I know I live right off of Statler, and I can tell you, like, we walk, especially right now every day, and it's super scary with all the kids in the neighborhood. So long term, do we have a plan to address some of these hot spots, as it were?
That's where this is leading us. So we just put this map together with all of the data we have. I'm pretty excited about that. And that's why I've already directed staff to start working on 79th. The other thing about 79th is we have a capital project in, I'm going to say like 3 years from now, funded to fill some of the sidewalk gaps. This is an opportunity to kind of further define the scope for that, see if there's some temporary measures or interim measures we can do, and then leading up to that capital one. But yeah, I definitely, the plan is to use this data to help us actually prioritize which streets to go after, instead of it being, I don't want it to be a random process based on, who's complaining, right? It should be based on listening to those, but on also data like this.
Yeah, no, this is just, it's a fascinating map. And, as we continue to make more data-driven decisions, this is a prime example of the data showing us where we have problems and what should be addressed. So thank you for putting this together, and thank you for the presentation. I know this has been a long process, and there's a multitude of different factors that's made it really difficult. But thank you for the presentation and your work.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilor Newton.
Councilor Newton. Hey, Lori, I just wanted to clarify. That's great. Would encourage residents to use the website to enter their traffic complaints. You showed us complaints around speeding. And, we had two issues really on Ascension: speeding / reckless driving and visibility. So I guess what I want to clarify for the public is, if they have other traffic concerns that aren't speeding, they would be encouraged to enter those as well. Because
yes.
we kind of had two issues there. Okay, just wanted to clarify that. And then I know people will use Ascension Drive as a way to get places, but do we have that? When I worked there, and you may not do this anymore, we had traffic map that identified routes. Do we actually identify Ascension Drive on a map as a neighborhood route, or is it just because that's how it's used?
No, it is. It is identified
Okay.
neighborhood route
Okay.
in the transportation system plan.
I just wonder, because it's such a steep road, and maybe there are no other options, but it is a pretty, it does have the visibility and steepness issues, and I concur. 28 feet is kind of narrow for a street like that. So just was wondering.
Yeah, it's a very narrow street. It's not a collector. It's a neighborhood route.
Right.
That is the identification in the transportation system plan. One of the things I've done in responding to some of the questions that have come in through the website for Ascension is I've mentioned to people that we are embarking on our transportation system plan update. So that's our citywide kind of master plan for street systems, and including bike and ped issues as well as auto. And that project is going to be going on for the next year, and so there will be lots of opportunities for public input in that might be related to, people could offer their comments about how routes should be designated, or about bike ped safety concerns, or all kinds of things. So,
Great. I'm sure people will appreciate that. And I too want to thank you for your presentation. I think it's really important that people understand the why. Sometimes the decisions we make, not everybody's happy with. They might prefer a different decision, but I think it goes a long way when we explain why, what the thinking is behind it, how it works, and, why the decisions are, what our options are and why. So appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, Youth Councilor Calderon, I think you're the only one that's not asked a question or made a comment, and you actually don't live too far from that street, if I recall.
Yeah.
So, any feedback or thoughts?
Yeah, I was just going to say thank you so much for the city to work on this. I do live quite close, as the mayor said. And let me tell you, as a new driver, driving up that street is absolutely terrifying. So thank you so much for all the work that we've done on this, because it is really needed. And then I just had one question. Maybe I just missed where you said it, but is there you said no parking on one side of the street. Which side will that be, or have you guys not decided yet?
So I don't have a design yet, but this is a bit illustrative. So if you can think about the inside of the curve, so kind of in this yellow area, it would be, the inside as you're going around the curve, and the blue area as you're going the other way around the curve. That it would be, that's why I was saying it would be partly no parking on one side of the street and then partly on the other side. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, we are a bit over time, so I want to try to move us on and get us back on time, if everybody's okay with that. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Thank you, Lori, for that again. And we will move on to an update on the I-205 tolling program. City Manager Wine, you're going to introduce this.
Mr. Mayor and Council, I actually don't have any introduction except to let you know that the I-5 tolling team is here tonight to give you an update on the status of the program as they move into the NEPA phase of the project. So you have tonight, I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves, actually. Lucinda Broussard and Heather Wills and Matt Delata. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Lucinda Broussard, the Tow Program Director. I have with me Heather Wills and Matt Delata. We're going to give an overview on the I-205. Thank you, Heather. I-205 project, where we are now, what we're about to go into NEPA, and we're right now within a 45-day comment period. So we're trying to make sure that we get out and just spread the word. You want to start the slides? There we go. I'm just going to do an update. Heather's going to talk about the purpose and need, and Matt is going to talk about the analysis that was done. And this is high level. We're at the screening. We're not at the deep dive, which is next once we get into the environmental review process. So we'll, not take up much time, but we want to make sure that we get the information out. Next slide, please. Next one. So here's what we're talking about. OR 213 to Stafford Road. The gold is the Abernathy Bridge, and this is that's the project area that we're discussing for tolls tonight. Next slide, please. During 2017, House Bill 2017 actually put in there that there should be tolls, and it was on I-5 and I-205. There was a value pricing feasibility analysis done. Many people participated in that. Many agencies, regions got together and talked about what does that look like. I mean, you're talking I-5 and I-205, and they took all of that and they distilled it down to two actually areas. So on I-205, it's OR 213 to Stafford Road, and on I-5, it's going to Multnomah. It's Multnomah to going. So that was the two. It instead of doing the whole thing all at once, it broke it down into pieces, and those were the two pieces it identified. We actually went out to the communities. We did extensive extensive, kind of what we're doing now. We're out trying to talk to our partners, stakeholders, agencies, and the public. And during COVID, that's very difficult to do. But we have webinars, online open house, putting things in newspapers, ads on Facebook, Twitter. We're trying to get out there in a new way in this virtual world. What we heard and what we continue to hear are those three things right there. How does that affect low-income communities? What's the transit? How do we bring transit? There's no transit. I've heard many times we were saying less transit, but someone said no transit. So transit's an issue. And then the last one, of course, is diversion onto the local streets if you're tolling the highway. Next slide. So as I said, we talked about, here's the list of all the things we've kind of heard about, and we kind of distilled it down to some things. The last three, actually we moved it around. So it's not the last three, it's the three above the last one that I was just talking about. And then there is one more, the top one, which we hear a lot. What happens to that revenue that's generated on the toll roads? We have gone out to the Oregon Transportation Commission. We were just there last week to discuss dedicating the revenue that's generated on a corridor to stay on the corridor. We'll be back in September to talk about it some more. They had some questions. We'll bring back some additional experts to talk about how that looks. I think they're open to the ideal. We've been hearing the ideal for a long time. So what we've tried to do is take those comments that we had, turn them into kind of questions, and then turn them into solutions. What would be the solution or the answer to those questions? So the equitable across all income levels tolls, we have an Equity and Mobility Advisory Committee that can address that. Is that slide in this deck, Heather? There we go. Yay. Thank you. We convened an Equity and Mobility Advisory Committee. It has 15 members, and they represent different aspects of equity, not just racial, not just economic. So we have health, we have someone for disability, we have someone for walking. And so it's kind of we have a doctor, it's kind of like, if you can get that many perspectives on something called tolls, which has no equity established for it. There's no place we can go and say, this is what equity looks like for tolling. That's what our Equity and Mobility Advisory Committee will be doing for us. So they're gonna have an equity framework that they'll lay across all of the tolls, I-5 and I-205 during this NEPA process, to come back and say, here are the, call them mitigations, or here are the things we believe you should do for these communities that are impacted. So we're looking forward to, whatever their recommendations are. They can generate a lot of information, so I'm really excited. Their next meeting is August 26th at 3:30. You should, drop in and listen. We do tape those, so they are available for you to listen because they are recorded. Next slide, please. So right now, as I said, we're in the 45-day comment period to start our environmental review process. What Heather's going to go through, the purpose of the project. Matt's going to go through the analysis we've done to talk about the alternatives. So we're going to talk about the purpose and need, the goals and objectives, and performance measures, and then Matt's going to talk about the analysis that was done for us to come up with we call them alternatives, but I will say options, the different options that work. We do have an online open house, as I mentioned previously. Please go out. We have a survey there. We have all the information. So all the analysis we've done thus far is available out on our websites. So if you can go out and look at all of our information, I think that helps when we do these presentations, which are really just brief overviews. If you want to go down and get into the real data, it's there. So Heather will hit some of these. I'm gonna just hit this one, and I heard you guys talk about stakeholder and community engagement. I think your engineer just talked about that, your chief engineer, which is really interesting because we're having the same issue. It's COVID. How do you do it? How do you make sure you reach people who are underserved and underrepresented and have been in these communities? So we are it's all of the different things we're trying to do. I did mention the online open house, the webinar, social media, we have fact sheets. We're doing these presentations, boards, agencies, communities, we're out. And then we're going to have some working groups, and we have two now. We have the regional modeling group, which is regional, Southwest Washington, all the way through Clackamas County, for sure, Washington County. A lot of the cities are represented there. And we also have a transit multimodal group, which includes transit and a lot of folks from the region and Southwest Washington to talk about what's transit look like now and what does it need to look like if you put tolls out there. Stakeholder interviews, we're calling our community-based organizations, it's almost like trying to bring everything together in a virtual world. The discussion groups are done by, we have community engagement liaisons, which you see below there, and there are folks in the community in their native tongue. They get together with friends, acquaintances, by phone, they can Zoom, they use their mobile phone, and it's a way to reach people to get the survey done and actually to give them information about what's going on with the project. So that way they are I like to say, helping us design what the project looks like and being included in that. And that will help with the EMAC, or the Equity and Mobility Advisory Committee, to actually get what are the community's needs and not just deliver a recommendation that doesn't consider what the community needs versus what we all think we should be doing. Next slide, please. I just want to touch on I-5. I-5 is going through a planning and environmental linkages. It's like, we're going to call that the pre-environmental assessment. The endpoints right now are Multnomah to Going. We're looking at that and we're trying to narrow those down. So the different permutations we have for that, we're trying to narrow it down to a handful versus a carload or a truckload. We are coming out in the fall to do the same thing, get engaged again and talk about here's what we're trying to do there. We'll be back out doing our public outreach. Just like this, we'll provide an update and about I-5 specifically. Equity and Mobility Advisory Committee will also be involved in this. So they'll get the same thing they're going to get for 205, all the information, all the communities that may be impacted, transit, everything is kind of overlaying on everything. And we'll still have our transit multimodal group, our regional modeling group would also be involved here as we just try to bring it all the way back down and say, okay, here's where we are. What do you think of these alternatives? So that's next, and that's I-5. We're looking at that happening later this fall. Next slide, please. So this is just a timeline of where we are. You see the orange dot is where we are, where we'll be after this 45-day comment period. We'll provide all of our comments and recommendations for the alternatives or the options to go into the environmental review process. And we'll provide those to Federal Highways Administration, that's FHWA that you see there. And it says starts the NEPA process, which is the National Environmental Policy Act, and it's the environmental review process. We use a lot of, as you can see, we're loaded up here. But that's where we'll be this fall, and it's a 2-year process. And I-5, I just talked about that preliminary or pre-NEPA, is that gold dot, the first one you see. And it goes through where the orange circle is, which is the start of this same NEPA process or that environmental review process for I-5. So 2 different tracks, but we're showing them because all of these require public input, and we want to make sure that we have, this is what you can look forward to, and that's what we'll be talking about. Next slide, please. Very specific to just I-205, the orange dot is where we are now. Same thing, you can see at the bottom all of the outreach we're doing, and you can see public open houses, and that will probably change to virtual. We were, of course, not sure what the future is going to bring, but at this point, we're thinking it's going to be virtual even first of the year. So throughout this whole process of this environmental review process, we will have public comments a period for that. And not only that, the ideal that you can send in your comments at any time, and we're trying to assess those as we get them. Next slide, please. Oh, Heather.
Lucinda,
Yes, sir.
before you move on, I just want to make sure, I don't know that everybody knows exactly who you are or how lucky Oregon is to have you. You're new to Oregon, but not new to tolling, right? I mean, you've got, I've had the benefit of seeing this presentation at both the ODOT Region 1 ACT meeting and also at the Washington County Coordinating Committee meeting. But for the counselors and our public, I just want them to know that you've got a lot of experience in this area and that we're lucky to have you. And you've done this work both in the state of Georgia and in Washington, the state of Washington, if I recall.
State of Washington. I was there for a decade. I've done Georgia, Florida, New York, DC. I've kind of been around. Hate to say it like that. I've done a lot of tolls all up the coast of California for sure. So I do know tolls. I've only been here 6 months, but it's a great opportunity. It's an implementation, and it's a wonderful time to show up. So thank you. I appreciate that. Heather?
All right. Heather?
Thanks, Lucinda. So I'm Heather Wills, and I'm with WSP. I'm leading the consultant team supporting Lucinda on these two projects. And I know that the city of Tigard has been really involved in Southwest Corridor project, the light rail project. So I'm sure a lot of this nomenclature from the National Environmental Policy Act is quite familiar to all of you. So I'm going to talk about the purpose and need, goals and objectives for the I-205 toll project. You might not need this, but just what is a purpose and need statement? It's really that concise statement of what the transportation problem is that we're trying to solve. Like what is it that we're trying to address by implementing a toll project in I-205? It really is the foundation for determining the range of alternatives, and so it helps us narrow those range of alternatives, but it's not the only way we evaluate the alternatives. This is really the pass-fail. How does the alternative help us solve that transportation problem that we're trying to solve? And then the goals and objectives are the additional desirable outcomes that accompany a purpose and need. That's all the other stuff that are the community values, things that we care about, and then quantitative and qualitative measures are developed to help us compare the alternatives between each other using the goals and objectives as a guide for doing that. So the project purpose for I-205 is twofold: to manage congestion as well as raise revenue to fund congestion relief projects. That dial is really just kind of showing the impact of a toll rate, that there is a low toll rate can manage congestion, high toll rates can generate a lot of revenue, but it's a sweet spot in the middle that really does both. And that's what we're trying to do with this project. I think it's always important to note at this point that we use assumptions around toll rates for the modeling that Matt's going to talk about, but the toll rate isn't determined until after the environmental process and we have a project, and that's determined by the Oregon Transportation Commission. So we get that question a lot: what's the toll rate going to be? And our answer is we don't know. We have assumptions, and that's what our modeling is based off of, but it could be something really different after all of the financial analysis that goes into establishing that toll rate in the future. So I guess I should have said in the very beginning, the purpose and need and the goals and objectives that are out for public review right now and for comment were, they were established from the value pricing feasibility analysis and the results of that. And then we coordinated with all of our partner agencies, so the counties, the cities, and asked for feedback on what we had proposed prior to sending it out for public comment. So I'm going to talk through some of the things that changed from what we initially developed to what actually is out for public comment right now. And one of the comments we got was to add equity into the purpose statement. And as Lucinda said, ODOT is centering equity for the decision process. The Equity and Mobility Advisory Committee is really guiding that approach, and they will provide recommendations in the end. We have a lot of goals and objectives that are equity focused, but for the purpose statement, we wanted to make sure to provide ODOT the most flexibility they could with the definition of equity. And so defining it in a purpose statement kind of pigeonholes ODOT in a way that putting it in the goals and objectives provides a lot more flexibility for utilizing many different definitions of equity, because there are a lot of different definitions of equity out there. So the project needs statement, these are just the fundamental data that support the purpose. And so it's the congestion, pre-COVID, of course, there were more than 6 hours of congestion daily on this section of I-205. There's no funding for infrastructure projects, and there's a lot of time in our cars, just generally in this region, but especially on that section of I-205. Everything in blue are the additions that we made based on that stakeholder collaboration that I was talking about a little bit earlier. So these are the goals and objectives, and all of this is on our online open house, and you can get the full text of the purpose and need statement, as well as all of the goals and objectives and some of the proposed performance measures, evaluation criteria that would accompany all of these. So please go on the website and take a look at this, and we want to make sure that these goals and objectives are really reflecting the community values for the toll project. So the next steps in the environmental review, this 45-day comment period ends on September 16th, and then we will issue the response to comments. We'll let everyone know what we heard and what has changed in all of the things that we're asking for comment on during that time. We've invited participating agencies, and I know that the City of Tigard did accept that invitation and is participating in our environmental review process formally as a participating agency. And then we'll move into the environmental assessment and do a really detailed analysis of impacts and benefits, as well as what some of the potential mitigation might be for impacts that we negative impacts that we can't reduce or ignore. With that, I'll hand it over to Matt.
Thanks, Heather. I'm Matt Delano. I'm a transportation engineer and the alternatives analysis lead for this project. So I'm going to run through our alternatives analysis process and some of the results we've seen in our technical work to date. Next slide, please. So before I jump into some of these results, I just want to talk about the overall process. We're still in the early stages and taking a relatively high look at the impacts that tolling could have. So as Lucinda mentioned, this is really growing off of the value pricing feasibility analysis, which identified a concept on I-205 to toll the Abernathy Bridge in both directions. This was called Concept E, and the finding was that it could manage congestion on I-205 and generate revenue, that dual purpose that Heather talked about. We're taking a step back at this point from that one alternative and asking the question, with different toll configurations and gantry locations, can we have better outcomes overall? So we're really relying on the Metro Regional Travel Demand Model, looking at 2027 scenarios and comparing all these toll scenarios against each other to see if we can get a better result. There's still a lot of unanswered questions at this point. We recognize that. The environmental review is where we'll really go into the higher level of detail and answer a lot of these questions that have come up. We'll look at 2040 impacts more long term, and figure out what kind of impacts and mitigations are needed. So if there is diversion, how is that impacting the adjacent roadway systems? Is it causing other intersections to fail to meet mobility standards? Those are the kind of questions we'll answer for the 2 or 3 alternatives that we advance into the NEPA study. Obviously, in the end, we want to get to a preferred alternative where the project will get refined and we'll be able to identify what all the impacts and needed mitigations to address them are going to be. Okay, next slide, please. So those 5 alternatives, I'm going to run through those pretty quickly. The first one is that value pricing feasibility analysis concept E, so a toll on the Abernathy Bridge. That's pretty easy to understand compared to some of these other alternatives, relatively easy to implement, but it also has relatively limited ability to manage traffic in the long run. It's just one toll rate on one location. What we've seen in both our work in this part of the project and in the value pricing feasibility analysis was that there's a concentrated rerouting effect through Oregon City, across the Arch Bridge and in through downtown. So we developed a second alternative, which is really a variation and very much similar to alternative one, where there would be gantries located on either side of the bridge to capture any through trips that might look to jump on and off and on I-205. Our third option essentially splits the toll in two between that location on the Abernathy Bridge over the Willamette River and some of the bridges over the Tualatin River. So for a through trip, essentially it would be no difference. But for a trip accessing locally in Westland or Oregon City between the two rivers, they'd essentially be paying half the cost. The fourth alternative would toll all four segments of I-205 between Stafford Road and Oregon 213. So same concept of splitting the toll, just doing it across four locations. This is the most flexible option for long-term traffic operations management, but it's a more complex pricing structure to communicate to users. And then our fifth alternative, same area, Stafford Road to Oregon 213, but a single zone toll, where whether you're traveling through and using all four segments, or whether you're just using one of the segments and accessing locally, you'd pay the same amount. Next slide, please. So just a visual representation of those real fast. And for alternatives 1 and 2, you see the orange area, which is the tolled segment over the Abernathy Bridge. For alternative 3, below that, we're splitting the toll between these two segments to the east and west. Alternative 4, those four segments, and then those little blue icons are potential gantry locations. And then alternative 5, which tolls each of the entry points. So we're looking at some measures to evaluate these different alternatives. One of them is the transportation system demand, how people use the transportation system. That's regional vehicle miles traveled, how many miles are traveled on the roadway network for both freeways and non-freeways, and vehicle hours traveled, how much time is spent in vehicles on the freeway and non-freeway system. We look at the volume of traffic on I-205, and we look at the change in volume on some of the surrounding roadways, diversion or rerouting, as well as some of the behavioral changes, the mode shift to rideshare and transit that can be produced in that 2027 regional travel demand model. We'll also look at a number of cost and revenue measures, the key one there being the net toll revenues that can be used to fund improvement projects. And then we also look at some qualitative considerations. How hard are these tolling configurations to implement? How flexible are they in the long run to manage traffic operations along the corridor? How do they scale to the future tolling system? The things from the value pricing feasibility, which looked at a more regional tolling structure, and then the federal program eligibility. Next slide, please. I'm going to start on I-205 and along the tolled segments. I talked about those four segments of I-205, and based on the 2027 regional travel demand model results, we're generally seeing decreases in I-205 volume, generally ranging between 20 and 35% over the course of a day. Two key points to note about that is that percentage decreases when we look at the peak hours. The off-peak diversion is higher than the peak hour diversion on a percentage basis. We also see that number getting a lot smaller immediately outside of the tolled area. So it's about 10 to 20% between I-5 and Stafford over the course of a day, and 5 to 10% north of 82nd Drive. So when I talk about the rerouting effects and in the slides to come, that's just useful context for regional rerouting compared to local rerouting. Next slide. Okay, so there's a volume decrease on 205. We call that diversion. So where does that traffic divert to? Some of it is going to reroute to other roadways. I mentioned the regional component, which I'll run through some of those impacts. Those are generally the same across all of our alternatives. The local effects of rerouting near the tolled areas vary substantially between our different alternatives. But not every trip that might have used I-205 previously is necessarily just going to take a different route. Some people are going to change their travel behavior in response to tolling. They might change what time of day they leave, they might change where they're going, and they might change how they get there.
Brendan is now joining.
The modeling work to date does tell us that there would be some changes in demand. The single occupancy vehicle trips are being shown that they would reduce. So primarily that would be shifts from people driving alone to sharing rides, about 4,000 to 5,000 additional per day. We also do see some shift to transit, but that's generally pretty small with our current assumptions about transit, fewer than 500 trips per day. Generally, these shifts in demand are pretty similar between all of our alternatives. Next slide, please. Okay, so transportation system demand. One measure of that is how many vehicle miles are traveled on the roadway network in the region, and another is vehicle hours traveled. All of these alternatives are reducing how many miles people drive on our regional roadways and how much time they spend driving our regional roadways. However, we do see a shift within those totals from freeway travel to non-freeway travel. The peak hours is when we see kind of the most benefit occurring, which makes sense with the congestion management approach. There's potential vehicle hours traveled saving there, not only on the freeways, but non-freeways as well. Overall, it's a relatively small shift at the regional scale, but within the project area, it can be noticeable. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to jump through a bunch of different locations within the region, kind of starting up high and then further away locations, and then zooming in closer to the tolled area. So I think it's pretty logical to think, okay, we're going to toll I-205. That means a bunch of people are going to shift from I-205 to I-5. It's not really what we've been seeing. We have been seeing some of that, some increases in traffic on pieces of I-5 and I-205, generally less than 2%, in a few places 2 to 5%. Closer to I-205, we're actually seeing some decreases as fewer people look to access I-205. These effects these numbers here that I'm showing are daily numbers, and again, during the peak hours, much less of an effect. Really, during those hours, volume changes are pretty negligible. Other freeways within the region on I-84, further up I-205, 26, and then down on 217, was similar kind of story. We're not seeing a big shift at the regional scale. Some shifting, changes of less than 2%, but nothing big. And then when you look at the peak hours, it really drops down to negligible numbers. Next slide. As we get closer to the tolled part of the corridor, we start to see some more interesting stories emerge. So within Lake Oswego at Oregon 443, south of Terwilliger Boulevard, we do see some potential for increases, 5 to 10% over the course of the day. On Stafford Road between Wilsonville and I-205, we actually see potential for a decrease in volume. Again, fewer people looking to access I-205 results in some decreases in that location. One spot that we identified as needing further analysis for potential impacts is Oregon 99E, particularly through downtown Canby. Potential there for increases in volume. We saw that back in the value pricing feasibility analysis, and we're seeing it now. Recognize that we need to look at that. Getting closer to the corridor, I think Borland Road kind of tells an interesting story. So in the east part of Tualatin, east of 65th Avenue, because that piece of I-205 between I-5 and Stafford Road isn't tolled, we don't really see a big shift over to that part of Borland Road. But immediately east of Stafford Road, depending on the alternative that we're looking at, there's a significant potential for additional volume to reroute to that roadway, which runs parallel to I-205. Oregon City, this was something that was identified in the value pricing feasibility analysis, this ability to travel across the Oregon City Arch Bridge and downtown. There are increases in all of our alternatives, but it's important to note that alternative one has a significantly higher percentage increase, and that drops with some of these other alternatives pretty significantly. Next slide. Westland is probably the most complicated story to tell, being kind of along the corridor, depending on which segments of I-205 get tolled in each of these different alternatives. You can see quite different stories depending on the location you look at. So again, that's one location where I think the environmental assessment will need to look a lot more closely at those effects. Next slide. So rerouting, overall analysis, what are the impacts on the local system? We recognize that's a concern. Everybody wants to know the answers. So this just kind of lays out our process for getting there. So in the feasibility analysis, it was a very high level look at potential rerouting, just identifying which roadways might get impacted. At this level, the screening analysis, I'm showing the potential scale of impact of those percentage changes, key locations, and our technical report available on the project website shows the breakdown of peak, off-peak, and daily. The environmental assessment is where we'll do the more detailed traffic analysis work, looking at specific locations, study intersections during peak hours, whether diversion kind of blows those intersections up to where they don't meet the mobility standards anymore, and what kind of improvements might be needed if that occurs. So this is a pretty high-level summary of each of these alternatives. Again, we're looking to compare them against each other to see which ones perform better than other ones. Those same criteria that I outlined earlier, the transportation system demand, the volume on I-205, diversion, cost and revenue, and implementation and operations, we looked at each of those and kind of identified which ones performed the best compared to the other alternatives. All of that is leading to our recommendations. Our recommendations are, again, which of these alternatives we're going to study further in the environmental assessment. At this point, our project team's recommendations is to look at alternative 3, which is splitting the toll between the two locations across the Tualatin River and the Willamette River, and alternative 4, which is the segment-based, the 4 segments of analysis. Alternative 1, again, it was simple and easy to understand, but it had that concentrated rerouting effect through Oregon City. Alternative 3 generally performed better in most of our measures. So that's why we're looking to advance that. Alternative 4 kind of gives us the maximum flexibility in the long run. Along the corridor, it translates best to the overall system and operations, and it lets local users pay a lower cost as those local access trips can essentially pay a lower cost, and it's proportional to how much they use the system. Whereas alternative 5 was the same cost whether you were a through trip or a local trip, and as a result it had some concentrated rerouting effects on the outside of that toll area. So that, that's where our project team is at this point with the recommendation, but we're going out to you all, agencies, and the public, and asking for input if we're headed in the right direction with this.
Thank you, Matt. Next slide. So it's the what's next. What's next are we're doing many more of these briefings. As I mentioned, we went to the Oregon Transportation Commission last week. We will be going back in September to get that revenue dedication. That's what we're looking for now. Revenue generated on a corridor stays on the corridor. We'll be going back in September to talk more about that with the commission. We have additional briefings. Not only this week, we are trying to make sure that we get out there during this 45-day period to let people know their comments they're necessary, but boy, I would think they're vital to our project and what we're trying to do here. Next slide. Have your say. I love this slide actually, because this is the one where it says, hey, come please look at what we're doing. This is all a draft. Everything we showed you was in draft. Nothing is in concrete. That's why we're asking for your comments. So here are the many ways to reach us. This evening we did a webinar. I think we had 49 or 50 questions in the end, which was really good actually. So it was good. It was great conversation. We didn't get to all of them in just an hour, but it was a good presentation. It is recorded. We're doing another one Thursday at 6:30. Same idea. We're just going to give an update and then we're going to take questions. You can submit comments by email. You can go online and do our survey, the www.oregontolling.org, or you can a voicemail. We'll take a voicemail. We're really just trying to gather as many comments as we can. Next slide. I want to say thank you for your time this evening. We appreciate it. And more information, any more we have, we will definitely try to come back and let you guys know what it is. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Do we have any questions or comments?
Councilor Newton, I don't have any questions. I really appreciate the thorough presentation and giving us an understanding of what went into looking at the different options and alternatives. So thanks for that, and thanks for all the work you're doing to try to get community feedback.
Welcome. Thank you. We appreciate it.
This is Councilor Lube. I want to echo Councilor Newton and thank you. I obviously had heard about the tolling project, but this really gives me a breadth of information, and learning about the alternatives and which ones you're advancing forward is really helpful. So thank you for your time here.
Thank you.
Council President Goodhouse, two questions. One, what's the impact on commerce with trucks or goods with UPS or FedEx? I mean, and a part of it, I'd imagine if there's less congestion, they'd be able to get through more. But what would be the effect of tolling them as far as trucks either passing through the region or delivery trucks that have to go through from area to area? How's that impact on them, and how was that calculated? And then I have a second question.
Matt?
Well, I think the biggest direct impact is that they would get a significant travel time savings along to I-205. Lucinda talked about the congestion that's there today. A lot of those trucks have a relatively high value of time. They're paying their employees to work, and they benefit greatly from that travel time, even more than a lot of travelers. So I think that's the most direct impact. In terms of the economic impact, that's something that we'll be assessing in more detail in the NEPA environmental assessment.
Thank you. And the second one, and I don't know where it's at, is this something that's going to be considered either as being passed at the government level, or is this something that would be going to the voters?
Which? The tolls?
The tolling, whether or not the tolling gets the overall, whatever areas decided. Is this going to be something that's be enacted, or will the voters decide on whether or not to approve the tolling?
House Bill 2017 dictated tolling and gave it to the Oregon Transportation Commission. And the feasibility analysis was about where on the 205 and the I-5. So it's already determined.
Yeah, the legislature's directed this, Council President Goodhouse.
Okay, I thought maybe I'd heard something that there's maybe some talks maybe at going to the voters, but additionally for the conversation. So maybe that was more talk of maybe a referendum or something that people wanted to be able to vote on it. So that's more what I was asking. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much, all three of you, for your excellent and thorough presentation. And we will move on to our next item on the agenda.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
You too. And we are going to convene as the Town Center Development Agency Board for the next item. Project Manager Fairley.
Good evening, Chair Snyder and the directors of the TCDA. My name is Sean Farley. I'm the Redevelopment Project Manager, and I'm here tonight with Brendan Buckley, who's a Senior Project Manager with Johnson Economics. We're here tonight to update the board on the City Center Futures Project. Let me bring up my PowerPoint here. Can you all see that? So we're going to update you on the City Center Futures Project, which addresses Strategy 2.2 of Council's goals for 2019 through 21, which is to continue to make downtown Tigard a place where people want to be by making substantial progress on projects that attract new residential and business investment. So there's three parts to the City Center Futures Project. And they address the tasks that were listed under the strategy. And that includes creating an inventory of sites with high potential for transit-oriented development, evaluate the size and scope of the urban renewal plan to determine whether TIF resources are sufficient to meet council objectives, and prepare recommendations regarding city center urban renewal areas possible continuation. And then also to update the 2007 Leland report to accelerate downtown redevelopment, focusing on the leverage possibilities of Southwest Corridor. So that's what we're doing. We're with this project, we are addressing those council goals and strategies. And tonight we're going to be focusing on the TIF district plan analysis. So, we're doing this now because the city center TIF district, it's in its last 6 years of its authorized duration of 20 years. $22 million was the maximum indebtedness authorized. Maximum indebtedness is another way of saying what the total budget available is for urban renewal TIF district projects. So $22 million is pretty modest budget. You compare that to the Tigard Triangle, that maximum indebtedness is 9 times the maximum indebtedness of the city center. And it's modest, especially considering that there are 32 named infrastructure projects listed in the city center plan. So of those, 14 have been completed or in some stage of planning. With the remaining TIF, we could probably only do a handful more of those projects. So we've used roughly 10.4 million of the authorized 22 million. We're behind in the TIF generation because, as you know, these TIF projections were done 2 years before the Great Recession. So that really threw things out of whack. We did amend the district back in 2017 to expand the size. So that'll help with the TIF generation, but even then, it's likely that we will not reach the 22 million in TIF by 2026. We were only able to have enough resources to do our first significant borrowing just last year. So we have a lot of projects, a limited amount of funding, and we're running out of time to complete them. So to look at this, about the future of the district, we engaged Johnson Economics to evaluate its possible continuation. So I will turn it over to Brendan Buckley.
Hello, this is Brendan Buckley with Johnson Economics. I'm an analyst with the firm. Before I start, can I ask how my audio is coming through?
Just fine. You sound great.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. So as Sean was saying, this is a multi-part project to look at the future of the city center TIF district. And what I'm going to talk about tonight is one component of that, which is to study the options for the TIF district itself. And this is more of sort of the technical analysis of looking at what can we do here going forward that is going to make the TIF district hopefully most successful, get through that list of projects and goals that the community has had since the outset of this. And so in order to do this, we looked at a number of options. Next slide, please. And the options boil down to, we looked at 3 distinct options that kind of taught us a set of findings that help us get to a recommendation. Option 1 is the option of maintaining the current district and looking at ways to extend it. And that involves a couple things. One is to increase the maximum indebtedness over time so that greater number of projects and a higher budget can be accommodated to accomplish those projects. Going along with that would be to extend the duration of the plan. So the current district is set to, as of the end of our fiscal year ending 2026, that is the current end of the adopted plan, and at that point the district would not take on any additional debt or start any new projects. It would be about using the TIF to pay off the activities during the plan. So in order to work within the current parameters of the plan, the idea would be how can we sort of increase some of those parameters. The other two options both come down to looking at ways to expand the district to include other areas around the central city. And the idea there was a couple of different things. One is to look at how an expansion might allow other areas that also need their own projects and own activities to happen to be included in a TIF district. And at the same time, by creating a new larger TIF district, you would start with you'd be looking at a larger area with a larger assessed value, over time, greater revenue generation potential. The differences between option 2 and option 3 are mostly about timing. So under option 2, we looked at what would it mean to close the current district now, get the current indebtedness paid off so we can start a new expanded district as soon as possible. And under option 3, we looked at what would it mean to finish the current duration of the plan, let that end, pay down the activities of the current district, and then start a new expanded district after that. Next slide, please. These are the areas that we looked at. The orange area in the middle is the current central city center urban renewal area. The triangle is in purple there to the right. And the other areas that are labeled A through E are different expansion areas that we looked at to do this analysis. Altogether, that's way too much territory. There's the city under statutes isn't allowed to have that amount of land in under urban renewal. But we looked at these different areas kind of just to see how different types of areas and real estate would perform under the modeling that we did. And what that modeling entailed was estimating TIF revenues going forward for the next 20 years. In the case of the option 3, which started later, then obviously we start that in a later year, and looking at the different characteristics of these areas and different combinations to see really how you can get the most revenue generation and the most bang for your buck from the TIF district. So we went through that analysis. We, for all 3 options, came to a number of findings. And next slide, please. Some of the considerations we needed to take into account. So there are limits on the total size and assessed value within the city that can be under urban renewal at one time, as I mentioned. Because the city just passed 50,000 people in population, that limit is now 15% for both the total size and assessed value. When you look at your 2 current districts, there is some capacity left, but not enough to cover all those expansions areas, as I mentioned, but to cover some of them and still really allow a fair amount of expansion if the community wants to do that. Under the current plan, the boundary cannot be extended. There's a statutory limitation on extending the boundary by 20%. And in the 2017 update of the plan, there was a boundary extension that used up that capacity. And so while operating under the current TIF district, there is no more room to physically expand the district. Maximum debt capacity can be extended by 20% over the life of the district. And there's an inflation factor, so that's 20% of the current indebtedness, plus you get to add on some inflation factor since the time of the original adoption. If there is an option for increasing the maximum debt capacity above 20%, and that requires concurrence from the other taxing jurisdictions that are affected, and you need to get concurrence or agreement from taxing jurisdictions that add up to 75% of everyone under in the tax base. So really you're looking at getting the concurrence of the largest taxing districts within within that area. All the options we look at, 1, 2, and 3, do end up requiring voter approval, and that's because to increase the maximum debt capacity does qualify as a substantial amendment to your current plan, and therefore would require voter approval, as a substantial amendment. The other two options would basically be new districts, and so of course those require voter approval under your local rules. Next slide, please. So after looking through these and completing our analysis, looking at what the numbers told us about how the different districts might perform, our recommended approach coming out of this is option 1, which is to look at what you can do to extend the maximum indebtedness of the current TIF district, look at expanding the duration of it beyond 2026, and possibly seeking concurrence from other jurisdictions to increase the maximum indebtedness even more than 20%. The reason that we've ended up with this approach is the current TIF district has a few advantages that come down to timing, and it also comes down to the original sort of baseline that the current TIF district has. When the district was created, you get the what's called the frozen base of assessed value that continues to go to the different taxing jurisdictions, and it's the growth above that, above the base, that begins to produce revenue for the urban renewal district itself. So the advantage of the current TIF district is that it has a low established frozen base going back to 2006, and it has had time since then to build up TIF revenue to the point where now the district is getting close to, I believe, approaching $500,000 a year now in TIF district. So really what it has is a very strong head start. And so if you look at the idea of ending the current district and starting over with a newer expanded district, yes, you would be starting from a larger tax base, but you'd have a couple of disadvantages. One is that your frozen base, you would lose your current low basis and start over with the new higher frozen base. And so you'd be starting over again to build that increment. And the other factor is that in ending the current district, you will, the TIF revenue generated in that area will still need to go towards paying down the debt of the current district before it can go to a new district. And so really, when we ran the numbers, what we found is that timing-wise, there is not a great advantage to even a substantially larger district. It would take up until we calculated approximately 2036, 2037 for the annual TIF revenue of a new expanded district to catch up to the TIF revenue of the current district that had simply had its timeline extended. So that is our recommended approach. We've produced a memo that also talks about the other approaches and talks about some of the advantages and disadvantages of those. As I said, all of these approaches would require a voter approval, in this case because you need a substantial amendment to increase the indebtedness and sort of expand and redo your project list. In order to just expand the duration of the plan, that can be done by, that's an action of the agency that needs to be approved then by the council, but that can be done without voter approval. And now the rules are such that plans can be open-ended, and so it would be discretionary if the community wanted to create a new deadline or end date to the duration, or leave it open-ended.
Brendan, can you be clear about this? Is this your recommendation as our consultant, or is our staff recommending, like, is this the the full City of Tigard staff recommendation.
Yeah, thank you for asking, and I'm sorry that I wasn't clear about that. This is our recommendation as the consultant, coming out of the options that we looked at. We were asked to make a recommendation, but this is ours as a consultant team, and just presenting it to you guys to discuss. And as I mentioned, there in our report, there is further discussion of all the options, including advantages and disadvantages, and estimated figures and so on.
Thanks, Brendan. Our next slide, I was gonna talk about that. Staff are in accord with the recommendation made by Johnson Economics. We think that with increased resources, we could do more planned projects. For example, a public parking garage, or things like an extension of the Tigard Street Heritage Trail to the south. We could also add some new projects in the plan, including street projects that were included in the downtown connectivity plan. Those street projects can be quite expensive. We can also do more development assistance to encourage transit-oriented development and affordable housing. And so far, we've only been able to do assist one of those projects. With more resources, we could do a few more. So Johnson and staff did present this recommendation to the TCAC in June, and if the board is in accord with this recommendation, we'll return in a few weeks with a more fleshed out proposal, include recommendations and analysis, proposals for new projects, proposal for a level of new maximum indebtedness, and also a recommendation of when we might go to the voters. So happy to answer any questions.
Wow, thank you, Sean. Council, who's got questions or comments? This is an important and significant decision for the future of downtown Tigard and the development of our city. Councilor Newton, anything? I'm going to go around to everybody. Councilor Newton, thoughts and recommendations?
Yeah, just a couple of things. I remember going through the last process, and it was really important to engage the other taxing agencies, just to give them a heads up and bring them along the way, even if we don't have it fully fleshed out. I think hearing from them and being able to articulate what we would be able to do if we did this, I think that's really important, because we got a little tripped up with making sure they understood what we were undertaking. I would make that
anything that would come forward in the next few weeks should include some sort of an outreach plan around that. Okay.
Exactly.
Engagement. Okay.
Yeah, right. Because we talked a lot about the benefits, and I think that would be important. And you might have described this, and I just didn't clearly understand it, or maybe this is something coming back. In terms of the 20% or concurrence, is that sort of part of the next step? How much we would actually be asking for in terms of indebtedness? Are you sort of do you have a thought yet, or is that coming later?
Yeah, that's going to come later. It's going to depend on our, how many new projects we want to include in the plan. So the 20%, we could do that with the voter approval. We would, of course, do outreach to the taxing jurisdictions, and that 20% would equal about $6.65 million. Right. If we wanted to go above that, then we would have to, officially get the taxing jurisdictions concurrence.
Right. Which is why I think it's...
Councilor Newton, you ended up on mute.
I'm sorry, I'll unmute myself. Which is why I think it's going to be important to go to the taxing, agencies, just to see what kind of thoughts they have on how we would move forward. So that's all I have right now. Thanks.
Councilor Lube?
Thank you. I think this is it's really interesting, just as we talk about the importance of transforming our downtown and some of the projects you were talking about. Like a parking structure would be really important. Parking can get tough down there, especially if we look at adding more housing and there's more walkability. And, even when you go to the farmer's market and stuff, sometimes you got to drive around a little to find parking, and just having a designated parking area would be helpful. But I just would want to make sure that we're also engaging the community. I really, right now is a really tough time, especially with the pandemic and everything else going on. And I know this is very forward looking, and decisions we're making today really impact 5-10 years down the road. But I think taking the community along with us and talking to them about what projects that they would support would be really important along the way. But this is really interesting and important stuff to talk about.
Thank you, Councillor Lube. Youth Councillor Calderon.
Yeah, like Councillor Lube said, this is all very important, and I do look forward to see what would be done with all this money. I have to say, I'm not an expert in debt and project management, so I don't have any comments at this time, but I am excited to see what will be happening in downtown and all of Tigard coming up.
Thank you. Council President Goodhouse.
A quick clarification, and maybe I heard it wrong. I thought that during the option one, the presenter was saying that there was an option of not going to the voters, or did it have to go to the voters no matter what? It just wouldn't have to go to the taxing, different taxing entities.
So there is an option of just extending the duration of the district. And that could be done with a council action. So it wouldn't be increasing the maximum indebtedness. That would remain at 22 million. But council could approve an extension of the district beyond 2026 until a maximum indebtedness of 22 million was reached.
Okay. So if
that's not the staff recommendation, though, correct, Mr. Fairley?
That is not. Our recommendation would be to increase the maximum indebtedness.
So on that topic, if we were to extend the maximum indebtedness and we go out to the voters and it doesn't pass, is there a risk, or does it affect the existing TIF district, or if it were to fail, would it still, that original TIF district, stay intact?
Is City Attorney Shelby on the line? My understanding would be that if the substantial amendment failed, then the existing district would continue as in the plan. It's already
and City Attorney, when you're answering that question, why don't you add on? Would there be any reason why, if it were to fail, why we couldn't then take the council action alone as a fallback position?
Certainly. So it would depend on how the ballot title was written, but I would assume we would draft a ballot title such that the existing would remain, and then the other one would only kick in if and when approved by the voters.
Okay. And I would presume that we would take from what worked last time. I think we had some great outreach last time with the Triangle TIF district and the extension of the downtown district, and we would emulate some of that similar situation and have same conversations as we did before. I think we were pretty successful last time, so I think highlighting the projects, knowing what we're going to do, and really clearly outlining what we have done and what we will be doing.
Thank you. City Attorney Rahal, I just want to clarify the answer to my add-on question. I assume, but I don't want to assume on behalf of the whole city, that your answer to my question that was related to Council President Goodhouse's is that we could then take action later on if for some reason a ballot measure or the voters did not pass something. We could still take any action we could take now, we could take later, as long as that wasn't precluded in whatever we put on the ballot.
Correct. Yeah, you could take any action that wouldn't require voter approval, or you could retry for voter approval at a subsequent time.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
Well, I think definitely we should at least extend the timeline to get the full 22 million, but I like option one. Boy, our timing has not been the best on this TIF. So I guess, Sean, just come back to us with some numbers, some new numbers.
And a proposed engagement and outreach, right?
Right. All around option one, I assume, right?
Yes. Well, I mean, that's what I think I'm hearing consensus around. Councillor Lube, Councillor and Council President Goodhouse say that, but Councillor Lube, are you in agreement with that plan?
Yes.
Councillor Newton?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Farrelly, do you need any other direction or any other discussion tonight?
No, your suggestions have been very helpful, and we'll be back and have a more fully formed recommendation.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item number 7 on the agenda, which is to receive a Parks Master Plan update. Mr. Rager.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'm Brian Rager, the Public Works Director. We're excited to be here tonight, and thank you for hanging in there. I know we're bringing up the end here, but we're coming at you tonight with a very important update on an important project, and that is updating our park. Joining me tonight is our co-project managers, Carla Stetter, she's a project coordinator in our engineering group, and Martin McKnight, he is our interim parks, recreation, and green infrastructure manager. Also joining us tonight is Alex Dupe with MIG. They are our consultant on the project, and Alex will be running the PowerPoint for us tonight and giving the main presentation. Before we get into the main presentation, I want to turn things over to Carla, who is going to make a few remarks before Alex gets going. Carla?
Carla, you're muted. Sorry.
You know, if I learn all this technology before I retire, it'll be a miracle. So here we go. I'll try to keep this zippy. And what I really wanted to talk about was this project is moving along very well, and we've discovered we're uncovering and discovering some very interesting things, and I want you to kind of watch for these as we go through the presentation tonight. I think one of the things that I'm most excited to sort of present to you is this Parks and Rec Master Plan provides us just a really great framework to achieve a lot of the city goals and council goals in general. Tigard's at a really interesting stage of development where we have large new segments coming in, which is exciting, and we get new infrastructure, but it also creates a little bit of inequity. And that's a natural stage of growth of a city. And so looking at our Parks and Rec Master Plan, we can kind of chart our course to keep things really more equitable, and to look at a way to move forward and make decisions based on some of the data that we've uncovered. So with that, if you can listen for that, and then I think another interesting piece, unlike most utility master plans, a park and rec plan is very much driven by the community. So you can imagine that with our new forms of communication, we've had to really adapt and respond. And so I think we've put together some good plans on how to get the community to share with us what their visions are for the future. So I'm looking forward to it. I'll turn it over to Alex. Thanks, Alex. I think they're going to really enjoy hearing what we've discovered so far.
Well, you've set it up well, Carla, so thank you for that. So hope for the best. Can everybody hear or see this screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I just wanted to...
yeah, your audio is not the best, at least to me. I don't know about others, but... Is that any better? Maybe a tad bit. I think you can probably go with that.
It's a little echoey, but it's better.
I apologize. Probably my basement layer of office at the moment. Once again, my name is Alex Duffy. I'm with MIG, and I'm the consultant project manager. And so thank you for the time tonight to talk about where we're at with the Tigard Parks and Rec plan. We've been doing a lot of work in terms of assessment, public engagement, but also, in a time of COVID, also considering kind of how to renegotiate that in terms of our public engagement and how we actually start to, develop a plan that has extensive public and community input, but also that kind of sets the stage for the next 10 or so years within the city to plan for growth around parks and recreation. So just to give you a quick kind of sense of where this project's going, we started back in the fall of 2019 with essentially looking at kind of basic inventory of your parks and recreation system. And right now, what we're looking at is really looking at those gaps within the park system, who it serves, who can access it, where those key elements are within the city in terms of the park's resources. And a key element of that is a current online survey which we're conducting through the middle of September, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But really, that sets up kind of these key pieces on recommendations and prioritization, which we're going to start be getting into in the fall. We've met with city staff to start talking about what that might look like, how we apply potentially an equity lens around specific implementation measures, but really starting to hone in on specific recommendations and prioritization for the long-range Parks and Recreation Plan. As a part of that, we will be looking at staffing and funding as a part of that implementation. So the Parks Plan considers both the kind of structural assessment and recommendations of your parks, but also looks at how it's staffed over time to make sure that they align in a parallel manner. Obviously, COVID-19 has changed pretty much everything for how we talk about process within the public realm. And where we were at early on in March was actually starting to think about how we do public open houses, gathering times when we can all get together to talk about specific activities. But that, of course, has changed, and so we have adapted, and I can show some examples in just a moment. But as a part of this, we do acknowledge that recreation has become even more important with COVID. As we're stuck in our houses, we need access and abilities to exercise and be outside. If you have children in particular, it's being able to get outside and be able to get them active. So we do acknowledge that planning for a long-term recreation study within kind of the short-term kind of needs of parks is a bit of an interesting place to be in at this time. I just want to talk briefly about your parks plan. This was one of the first tasks that we looked at, and really stepping back to the base kind of elements of what Tigard is in terms of demographics. You have an interesting breakdown in terms of residents. About 47% of your residents are either under 18 or over 55. Those are targets that actually use parks a lot, whether you have children or you're retired and you have more time to spend in parks and open space. You have a lot of that population which actively uses parks, as opposed to those who might be working all day and not able to access them then as readily. You also have quite an array or kind of diversification in terms of income. You have a number of houses, over 3,000 to be exact, that live on less than $25,000 a year. That's about 15% of the households within your city. When you compare that to over 7,000 households that make over $100,000 a year, that's about 34% of your households within the city. They're making much more money. And so when we think about public amenities like parks and open space, we start to think about what's the accessibility and the access issues based on both demographics as well as income and the ability to actually access those spaces that everybody needs as a part of the community. So they're just considerations that we think about in terms of state of parks, but it also helps frame when we think about implementation and prioritization for park space, where those spaces might be most readily located. From racial demographics, you're pretty consistent with the Portland metro region. You're about 82% white. The remainder are a variety of different races and demographics. We are attempting through this process to reach out specifically to non-native English speakers, to community immigrants, to others who may not typically be part of a process. The current survey is in both in English and Spanish, and we have partnered with Unite Oregon to increase that outreach, particularly to communities of color who typically would not go to a community meeting or take a quick survey. So we are looking at that in terms of how we start to develop our recommendations to make sure that we have as much community input as possible. So just to state, talk a little bit about your park system. You have about 270 acres of developed parks, plus about 80 acres that you've acquired since 2009. You have 234 acres of natural areas, plus about another 44 acres that you've acquired. And overall, 5 years of an expanding recreation program. So we think of parks in two elements. First is the facility, which is the park itself. The other piece is the recreation and programming that often is associated with that. And that's something that we've added to our scope that we'll be considering more in depth about kind of those specific recreation elements in relation to the parks. You timed things very well. Unlike maybe your urban renewal area in downtown Tigard, you actually timed your bond very well in 2009 to be able to acquire a number of park spaces. So for that, the recession actually worked really well to be able to buy property. So you were able to purchase over 100 acres of land since 2009 for parks, which is great because parks are expensive, land is hard to come by, and Tigard is growing quickly. And so it was a well-timed purchase, particularly for outlying areas that are developing now, like River Terrace. And this is just a map of showing some of those acquisition areas. So just a quick park system overview. I'm not going to step through all of this. You have a pretty well-rounded park space, or park system. You have sports field, you have a skate park, a number of shelters that can be rented, playgrounds, community gardens, and courts. Your park system really runs the gamut across kind of what people would typically see in parks. But you also have a number of natural areas, about 234 acres in natural area, which provides another type of amenity for park space that's not necessarily developed as a court or a field, but still provides that cool quality that Tigard parks have. In addition to the state of the parks, we look at both local and national trends in how parks are being used, how they're being planned and programmed. And we have memos for all of these if you're interested that you're welcome to take a look at. But really kind of the key, I think, pieces for Tigard as this relates to trends in parks are how parks are used. It's much different than they were 10 or even 20 years ago, where parks now are really being asked to do a lot of different things. Multiple types of uses in spaces, shifts in how parks are being used, demographic shifts, particularly in some communities. For some communities of color, large family gatherings are really important, and we're seeing that much more so in park usage as well. And so being able to assess, identify, and plan for specific demographics within your community are really important in how we think about future parks and how they're used. The other piece, and I think this is really important for Tigard as well, is the demand for trail-based activities. With Fano Creek and other kind of regional facilities that you have, being able to incorporate those into your park system, but also offering trail-based activities adjacent, whether that's exercise equipment or interpretive elements, that's also a key piece that we think is important for Tigard. So we've talked a bit about this in terms of programming and activities, but cities in general are getting a lot more out of their parks, primarily through programming. And this is going to be an added element that we'll be looking at through the parks plan for recreation. But it does a few things. It enhances the community benefits of parks, able to provide that kind of multidisciplinary effect or impact that parks can provide. It increases participation among underserved groups because you can really target the needs of specific groups that may not be using the parks as much as they should. But then it also provides essential services to vulnerable populations. And so that's a consideration, particularly for COVID now, for who is using the parks, what are types of essential services that we can provide to make sure that they are used as a public amenity for everyone living in the community. Some things we're seeing in COVID, and I spoke to this just briefly, but there is an increased demand for parks. We got to get out of our houses. We got to get the kids out of our houses. We know that there's been questions about, why are the playgrounds closed? Why don't we just open them up? Those are certainly impacts to the community, but we're also in a unique time, kind of in our where we're at now, and so those times will pass. And so when we think about a long-term plan, we do think about the impacts of COVID, but we also look at how those parks can reduce stress and improve mental health. And then, considering what we would do in the future for specific types of facility and uses within there. So COVID has, made us think slightly different about public spaces. So I want to talk briefly just about some analysis that we've done, and this is called a 10-minute walk analysis. And this is becoming the norm nationally in terms of how we look at access to parks. And the city of Tigard has used this standard for a while, but essentially every person should have access or be within a 10-minute walk of a park. And so that's Trust for Public Land, which is a national nonprofit who's advocated for this, and as many jurisdictions have, Tigard has implemented this. So when we look at the city of Tigard and we look at existing parks, we look at sidewalks, where road connections are, the areas in blue on this map are where locations are that are within 10 minutes of a park. And the great thing about this map is it shows that a lot of Tigard is covered already by that 10-minute walk analysis. But those white areas are areas that really have no park coverage. And some of them we know are commercial or industrial areas, so we can discount those. But other areas like the Tigard Triangle, which are burgeoning with development that don't have park space, those are key considerations as we think about priority and implementation for expanding park space. The other piece for this is if we look at demographics, who's served and isn't served by parks. Lower income, often more diverse neighborhoods have less park access on this map. And so that's something that we're considering as we think about implementation and priority access and projects as we move forward. Another element of this, as I spoke before, is the importance of your trails component. So there's been a lot of discussion, and actually your Parks and Rec Advisory Board talked a lot about this, is a trail actually a park resource? And the question is that, what service does it provide? Is it just a linear connection? Does it provide something broader? For this now, we're looking at this as that it's still within a 10-minute walk shed, and so we're considering it recreation space. But it is slightly different than what a traditional park might provide. So if you compare that, the light blue being the trails and the dark blue being the park's access, you start to see that there's still lack of coverage for some areas. And partly that could be due, like River Terrace, for example, there just aren't roads in those areas, and so you won't see coverage there because there's no accessibility to certain locations of those parks. But other areas like number 6, number 7, 12, 9, those are areas that, when we think about, kind of that gap analysis and those key needs, there are key locations within the city that deserve some additional consideration, and that's what we'll be doing through the next steps for this project. So let's talk briefly about community engagement activities. Prior to COVID, we partnered with the city to do a number of kind of out and abouts back in August and September, just to get people's kind of quick thoughts about what types of park space they like, what accessibility issues, different types of things that might be of interest to people. So we were able to do some initial engagement, and that's an intercept dot exercise, an image of that. We've interviewed a number of stakeholders, both user groups as well as individuals that have interest in specific park elements. And that includes focus groups around specific uses like fields, whether it's soccer or softball, or natural resources like Tualatin River Keepers for how the river is accessed. And the key piece that we're doing right now, which will inform a lot of the gap analysis, is our map-based questionnaire. So if you haven't taken it, I encourage you to do so. It helps us identify where specific issues are within the system, recommendations for how we move forward, and this is going to be a key element wrapping up middle of September as we kind of refine the gap analysis and get into some of the recommendations. So just a couple things what we've heard. People love being surrounded by nature, and that access, for active mobility, walking, running, biking, especially for trails, is important. A lot of people use your trails, community parks, and nature areas. We're seeing increases in uses over time for that. But there's also a desire for connected spaces. So it's not just about a trail or a park, it's being able to take a trail to a park or take a trail between parks. So people are looking for slightly different experiences than you would traditionally in more of a suburban community. They're looking for more an experience. There are definitely issues in terms of cost, in terms of providing recreation amenities. Who has access to those services? One example is if you're renting park sites for rentals for picnics, does that fee actually have an issue for who has access to those specific sites? But overall, the community knows that you've done a lot with existing resources. They know and they've seen that, but there's also the question that we're seeing through some of this outreach is that, how do we continue to build that, and how do we really focus on not just those new beautiful parks in River Terrace, but really bringing up to its peers the parks within the existing neighborhoods in Tigard. Other opportunities and challenges, existing land and facilities, you got a great amount of land that's unique in a lot of places to be able to have developable park space that you already own. You can complete those links to the trail systems, which you're already doing for Fan Oak Creek to some extent, but also River Terrace and others, also great possibilities. Overall, while you do have some areas that don't have service, you are close, many homes are close to recreation. So when we think about COVID-19 and being able to walk and quick access to a park, you have a lot of opportunity to do that. I think the questions get into how do we fill the gaps within the built community when land is limited, and particularly funding that growing system if we have to acquire new space. Connecting those neighbors, particularly ones that don't have it now, can be challenging. And then hopefully the economy will turn around at some point, but sustaining a system today is obviously a challenge with revenue down. So those are things to consider as we move forward. So with that, I just want to thank you for the time. If you have any questions, be happy to answer that.
Alex, thank you very much. Mr. Rager, is there more to this presentation, or should we take questions from Alex now? Or questions of Alex?
We are ready for questions.
Okay.
And Mr. Mayor, we're ready for questions. You bet.
Okay. Youth Councilor Calderon.
Yeah, no questions. Oh, actually, I would like to say that I do enjoy using the parks. I like trails. Trails are cool. So yeah, hopefully we can help out our parks. And I know a lot of families are sad that parks aren't quite open, but there's not much we can do about that. But yeah, thanks for all your work.
Well, it's definitely challenging right now. We acknowledge that for sure. It's when you need the access the most is when it's tough.
Yeah.
So we hear you.
Councilor Anderson.
Nice presentation. I'm just looking forward to seeing on your timeline when some of the newer parks are going to come online. And other than that, a very nice job.
Thank you. Yeah, and that will be part of the implementation process, and we're looking, hopefully how to pair that with some of the recreation programming, and that's a new part of our scope, and so that will be coming up in the coming months. I think one of the questions we've also had is how River Terrace integrates with this, because there's also a lot of park planning going on out there through that process. So we've been coordinating with them as well to make sure that we have a complete picture of kind of all the actions that are happening on the Parks and Rec side.
All right, Council President Goodhouse.
Yes, a great presentation. Two questions, or a question and comment. I'm curious, 10-minute walk, what does that break down to in distance? I mean, everyone walks at different speeds, so I just had a curiosity question on what a 10-minute walk actually breaks down to be.
Yeah, that's a good question. About a quarter mile, thereabouts. For an average person, as you said, it does depend on, if you're pushing a stroller or you're elderly, that could be a little bit longer. But we generally look around a quarter mile. And that also is dependent on environment. When we do the 10-minute walk analysis, we do that through a GIS access points with streets. And that takes into account as much kind of local knowledge as possible, but it could also be environment that you look at that can affect that, and that's really a localized question for some of those parks. So do you have sidewalks, for example, or do you have wide enough sidewalks where people will use that space? So it's a general calculation, but it gives us a good sense of where service is and isn't.
Okay. And the other part I was going to comment on is it's great to really show that and see the trails, because that's the biggest thing I hear from residents is the trails, and a lot of them are little short spurts, or they don't connect, or how to get from one area to the other area. And that's the biggest thing I've heard of some people moving to River Terrace, but really finding a trail if they want to go walk a longer distance or go run, or how do you access different areas. Right now you're saying that with the 10-minute walk or getting around to different parks, if there was more trails that went through neighborhoods or back ways, there'd be more people that could get around. I know that some people will take the trails to downtown Tigard, and I think people would get around more to the parks or to the store or to areas if there was trails where they could stay off the roads, but they could access trails around. So that's a great map to really show where we need to fill in a lot of those gaps with the trails and get around.
Yeah, and I think that's a good question. That's something that the Parks and Rec Advisory Board talked about as well too. And I think also we're seeing in some of the public engagement about kind of new desired experiences. Are there trails that connect parks so that there's not kind of a dead end, if you will? You can go one place to another. I think the other question with trails, there's certainly more the traditional trail space, which is like Fano Creek or other places, but there's also, and we were looking at this in the Tiger Triangle for the Equitable Development Project with Sean. Could you have trails on a street? Like wide sidewalks that are slightly different, demarcated, so that there's different types of elements, both urban and suburban or rural, that could accommodate that, so you complete those connections. So there's different ways to look at that, but certainly that access is important.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, Councilor Lube.
Thank you. I've been robustly involved with this process. I was part of the interview team and all of it, and I'm really thankful for our very active Parks and Rec Advisory Board, who are pushing for really great questions to come out of this. I think this is really important for our next 10 years. As we've said, parks and recreation and trails are really important to our Tigard residents, and it's important to hear from them. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the information we get back out so we can continue to plan the next 10 years. I was actually, again, kind of surprised when we saw the 10-minute walk analysis for the first time that we had so many areas that weren't covered. I thought we would be better covered than that. And so when we talk about equitable access, I think that's a really great point and a starting point for us to be able to say, we are missing parks in these areas or trails, and how do we continue to develop that so everybody has equitable access to being outside, which is especially critical as we talk about building more density and building up rather than out. So it's just a really important piece for us to be on top of as we're doing all of this planning. So I'm really appreciative for the work, and I'm really excited to see the 10-year plan, which is going to help us immensely in our planning process. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Councilor Newton.
Thank you. Yeah, just a couple of things. Thank you for the great presentation. I, especially to echo Councilor Lube, appreciated the maps that showed, access that folks have. Having worked for the city as a planner and being familiar with some of those neighborhoods, I do have concerns, some of those low-income neighborhoods that don't have access. I concur with what you said about a lot of folks I'm seeing, because I'm lucky to live in an area near a lot of our parks, using our parks in a more informal manner, just as a place to gather, especially people that don't have a space of their, in a yard or something. So I'm observing that a lot too. So I'm interested in the funding piece as well, how we're going to finance that moving forward. So looking forward to that. And I did go on right a little bit before the meeting to take the poll. And since I live so close to so many parks, it wouldn't let me pick more than one park. So just a note, I couldn't select all the parks I live near, so just had to select one. So anyway, just a note, I'm fortunate. I live within easy walking distance of 3 parks. So just thought I'd comment on that. Thank you, though. Thanks for the good work.
Thank you. And I think the question, Councilor Liu, you brought this up as well too. From when we think about kind of an equity framework around how we address the areas in need, I think that's something that when we were talking internally with city staff, I think there's a lot of questions about how to do that. And so I think this plan is an opportunity to start thinking about what framework that might actually, how that could evolve and inform this process or others. So it's been great to talk to city staff and just get ideas for how to formulate that. That helps us internally as well too, to get something that's more holistic for the community.
Mr. Brager, I want to be clear that we're doing what staff need us to do tonight. Is there more to the discussion here or other direction or action that you're asking the council to either take or give input on?
No, Mr. Mayor, we were just wanting to give you all an update of the project and answer any questions you have at this point. So that's really all we were after tonight.
All right, thank you. Any other final questions from council?
One question I had, or I guess comment, is it part of the study at all also the access that citizens have to where the trails and the parks are? I know a lot of times, especially if people are new to the area or maybe even been in the area for a long time, it always seems like it's hard for them to really get access of what where the trails are, where they go, where the parks might be. I know that the boards can be really expensive if you want to put like one around downtown Tigard that shows where they are, but maybe if the little signs that have some kind of a QR code or something can go that shows where this trail might go, because that's where I hear a lot of times people, they don't realize how far the Fennel Creek Trail goes, or one part stops or where it goes to another area, so they're kind of leery to go check it out or go, or they don't know where it goes. But if there was an easy process for everyone to know where these go, I don't know if this kind of goes into your study or a part of it. I mean, you're looking at the walks parts, but the big part of it is would people use it more if they knew about more of the parks, maybe have some picture of what can be done there and how things look and how far these segments of the trails are and where they are and where they go.
I think that gets into wayfinding, which that's not part of our plan, but I would say from an implementation standpoint, identifying a wayfinding strategy or plan around parks and open space could certainly be an implementation outcome as a part of this. But one thing you would want to do with particular wayfinding is actually mapping, kind of how that would come together, and that's a study of its own. But I could see that as an implementation step that we could recommend as a part of this parks plan.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, any other final comments or questions? Otherwise, we have no non-agenda items. City Manager Wine, do you have an administrative report tonight?
Mr. Mayor and Council, I do have a brief administrative report tonight, so I'm just going to update you about a few things if that works for you. Last week, our Assistant City Manager, Kathy Nyland, mentioned to you a new feature in your weekly newsletter, and it was an infographic about communications to help with data-informed decisions. So we've spent a lot of time working on processes and improvements to consolidate our reporting about constituent communications, and we're seeing good results. And this morning, I just want to give you an update because tonight you saw a bunch of geographic information system-based analyses, and you're going to see more of that. This morning, the leadership team saw a presentation about an analysis that, and you saw some of this in City Engineer Fea's presentation, using GIS data that would identify some of the areas of greatest transportation need in the city, and how we will make use equity to make decisions about transportation priorities. So I just want you to know throughout 3 of your presentations tonight, you saw some of that mapping analysis, and we're hoping to bring more of it to you. So I just wanted to note that to kind of wrap up or tell you a thread that's running through a lot of what you're seeing tonight. Here are some other updates on some of our services. Our Tigard Cares Phase 4 launched last Wednesday, August 12th, and it opened at 11 a.m. and within 24 hours we had 104 applications for funding for the Business Assistance Grant Program. So we said that we would keep the program open as long as funding allowed, And as of 5 p.m. yesterday, Monday, we had 180 applications for business grants. So you'll recall that we're partnering with MISO, Micro Enterprise Services of Oregon, to deliver the funding, and application review is beginning now, including checking business license applications or registrations. There's also scoring of the business, including a business location factor, which I think you heard about last time Mr. Purdy presented to you. So I wanted you to know that award recipients will be notified as soon as that review is done, and that'll all be starting this week. Let's see. We've also been talking to our staff, Tigard staff. As you know, our workforce in Tigard is it's over 300 staff, and we wanted to check in with our staff about their working experiences during COVID-19. So we've done a staff survey, and I think the goal was both to learn from our staff how they're doing to navigate COVID-19 and also inform our future decisions about providing our services to customers. So we launched an internal survey last week, and we've received about half of our workforce responding to the survey. I just wanted the council to know that our staff are reporting back over 90% say that they're able to work effectively in their current work environment. That might be field staff. If it's folks in public works and police, it might be folks who are working from home. Our staff feel supported. 90% say they feel supported during COVID-19. Most, 88%, agree or strongly agree that we're communicating timely to them. And a similar number agree that we should not return to pre-COVID work schedules until maybe the beginning of 2021. So those are conversations the leadership team has been having about when our reopening, whether reopening should be tied to something related to a phase, which is what we're working on off of right now, or whether we should be thinking about not tying something to a state phase, but to when we can bring folks back. The top challenges that our employees say they face include distractions at home and their physical workspace, being able to work at home, right? I'm sure that we've all understand those challenges. And then we also asked our staff about what kind of notice they would like to have to be able to come back to work, and the answer to that was several weeks. So I just want you to know we're continuing to check in and what we're hearing from the folks who work for Tigard as we progress. And I know that this has all lasted a lot longer than we expected.
City Manager Wine, when you talk about reopening the city, I guess I just want to emphasize the city's open for business. We're really talking about a physical reopening, not a, I just want to make sure the public is fully aware of that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate, Mr. Mayor, you pointing that out. One of the most important messages that we've tried to emphasize is that we are open, we're open for business. And while the doors to our buildings might be closed, we're doing everything we can to provide services online, virtually, by phone, and be available for folks to find us. So thank you for pointing that out. So I had a couple of another point that I think you heard about last week. Our library director reported today that she had one of the library takeout shifts at Tigard Public Library, and she was able to interact one-on-one with somebody who said that they appreciated that the city was able to offer the service while so much is shut down. So you're right. I think the physical closure of our doors is one thing, but the availability of our service is something we're trying to be creative about, making services available. And you might have seen there was a Tigard Times article about Tigard and Tualatin providing the outdoor service desk, online story times. And so I wanted to just note that again. So thank you for pointing that out. Earlier in the year, you asked about this, Mr. Mayor. We're acknowledging the passage of Congress back in 1919 and the centennial of the ratification on this day in 1920 of the 19th Amendment to the Constitution. And it says the right of citizens won't be denied by the U.S. or any state on account of to vote. The right to vote won't be denied on account of sex. And so we celebrate the centennial of the women's right to vote today, although in reality, that was a pretty oversimplified story. And the 19th Amendment didn't really grant the vote to all women or any women in particular. So persons of color have continued for the ensuing generations to fight to gain voter rights and to fight voter suppression. So anyway, I just wanted to note that we were wondering when we were going to be celebrating that, and we've reached August 18th. And so I just wanted to mention that on administrative report.
Well, we had great ideas of grandeur of having some massive celebration, and that just this year that was not meant to be. So
right. And then finally, let's see, a couple notes from the police department that I just want to share with you. This week, Commander McDonald is, both the chief and Commander McDonald have been staying in touch with the Building Bridges Steering Committee, and they're planning their annual October 22nd virtual Building Bridges event. The Building Bridges of Understanding in Our Communities, it's an event series that it was established back in 2016, and it brings together leaders in law enforcement with civil society organizations. And their goal is to examine and understand the racial and ethnic disparities that exist in our communities, and also how to explore ways to remove them. So I just want you to know that the planning for that event is proceeding, and this year I think the emphasis on that partnership is more than ever. So let's see, one other note, I'm hoping that you'll just keep in mind, many of the communities around us have either canceled or the police department is not involved in the National Night Out events, even though they've been rescheduled for October. So our department is checking in with neighborhoods to find out who is actually planning to gather. And I think in an effort to not encourage people to gather, the police department is considering not participating in National Night Out. So once you'll hear from the chief soon about what she hears about plans out in the world to have National Night Out events. Usually we have somewhere between 40 and 50 events in our city, but we may not be able to carry that forward. So look for news from the chief about National Night Out and whether it will go forward. I think that's all.
And that's related to COVID-19.
Yes, thank you for that also. I mean, with the gathering restrictions of no more than 10 people, I think neighborhoods are either going to need to be creative or go virtual or figure out some other way to have their event. So that's all I have for administrative report tonight.
Thank you, City Manager Wine. Oh, go ahead, Council President Goodhouse.
If it turns out with National Night Out and neighborhoods get creative and go virtual, is there a way that we can connect into those? Or
Yes. And we'll figure out how that will work. It might be that the police department has a different way to interact with the neighborhoods, and we can find out from them if they would like counselors to visit virtually and how you can do that.
Yeah, I think it would be great for the counselors, the police, and the fire still all to join them virtually if you can.
TVFNR is not participating this year, so that's. I mean, we're going to have to figure it out.
Okay, we do not have an executive session scheduled. I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
Council President Goodhouse, I move for adjournment.
Councilor Newton, I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. City Recorder Krager, roll call vote, please.
Councilor Lube?
Yes.
Councilor Anderson?
Yes.
Mayor Snyder?
Yes.
Youth Councilor Calderon?
Yes.
Council President Goodhouse?
Yes.
And Councilor Newton?
Yes.
All right, just to be clear, Youth Councilor Calderon's vote was an advisory vote. All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night.
All right.
Bye-bye.